Chapter 493. Mo Xiaoyao smiled but did not speak. Ling Taihan had already lost interest in Lei Jinting's martial arts. If he didn't have a personal grudge, why would he attack when he heard that Lei Jinting had come to the Prince Ding mansion? When the show was almost over, Mo Xiaoyao thought that he couldn't let a guest of the Prince Ding mansion be killed in the mansion. He laughed loudly and said, "Genom of Gojoseon, Pavilion Master Ling, since the sparring is almost over, why don't we all stop?" Ling Taihan swept a glance over and then took a step back. He landed on the top of the wall and looked down at Genom of Gojoseon. Compared to Ling Taihan's elegance, Genom of Gojoseon appeared to be in a difficult situation. There was a trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth. He pressed one hand against his chest that had been hit by Ling Taihan's palm. His expression was heavy. He turned to look at Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao who were watching from the side. He said in a heavy voice, "Prince Ding, Princess Ding, what is the meaning of this?" Yi Li took a step forward and said with a faint smile, "Genom of Gojoseon, please forgive us. Pavilion Master Ling has been a guest at the Fu these days. Please forgive us for our lack of manners. Pavilion Master Ling, if you don't want to drink, why don't we have a cup of tea?" Ling Taihan raised a fist in a salute to Yi Li. He laughed loudly and said, "I was just passing by and saw Genom of Gojoseon come in. I was itching to spar. Please forgive me, Wang Fei." Yi Li nodded and smiled, "Pavilion Master Ling, take care." Ling Taihan nodded at Mo Xiaoyao, then flew out of the front courtyard. After inviting Genom of Gojoseon into the main hall to take a seat, Yi Li looked at Genom of Gojoseon, who had an ugly expression on his face, and asked, "Prince, do you need a doctor to come over and take a look?" Genom of Gojoseon gave a light snort and wiped the blood from his lips. "Many thanks, Wang Fei. It's just a small wound." Yi Li nodded. It seemed that the wound was not serious. Although Yi Li did not know why Ling Taihan would suddenly step in and start a feud with Genom of Gojoseon, she did not object to the current outcome. A Genom of Gojoseon with internal injuries was clearly more beneficial to their interests than a Genom of Gojoseon without any injuries. Letting the servant girls serve tea and leave, Genom of Gojoseon looked at Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li. He asked straightforwardly, "I heard that Go is a guest in the Wang Fu. Can he come out and meet us?" Mo Xiaoyao's brows rose. His snow-white hair made his smile appear cold and emotionless. "Guest? Li, have you invited Genom of Gojoseon to the Fu as a guest?" Yi Li shook her head and gave a faint smile. "I left the city the day before yesterday to inspect the Qilin station and only came back this morning. Why would I invite Genom of Gojoseon to be a guest?" Hearing this, Genom of Gojoseon's heart sank. He also understood why Lei Tingfeng had silently fallen into Princess Ding's hands even though he had brought so many people with him. Qilin, the strongest troop under Princess Ding's command. No one had actually seen them before. The only thing they knew was their valiant battle record. Genom of Gojoseon frowned slightly. He took out the invitation he had received and asked, "Then, what is the meaning of this invitation from Prince and Princess Consort? What is the purpose of inviting I to the Fu?" Mo Xiaoyao leaned against the armrest and gave a faint smile. "It's not a big deal. In a few days, I and Princess Consort will be inspecting the Northwest and will not be in Glass City. That's why I wanted to inform His Highness, so that there won't be any lack of hospitality." Genom of Gojoseon looked down and thought for a while before smiling. "I see. Actually, I and Quan have already left Xiling for almost 2 months. We have been busy with domestic affairs and had the intention to leave. It's just that Quan went out yesterday and did not return. I'm afraid we will have to trouble Prince and Princess Consort." Mo Xiaoyao promised generously, "Genom of Gojoseon, don't worry. As long as the Crown Prince is still in my Northwest territory, even if he hides in a hole, I can find him for you." Genom of Gojoseon's heart sank. After talking for a long time, Mo Xiaoyao seemed to have promised, but in reality, he did not promise anything. He was captured by Mo Xiaoyao, this was something everyone knew. But as long as Mo Xiaoyao did not admit it, no one could do anything to him. Furthermore, he promised to search for Quan. He would search for him for 10 days to half a month, or even 3 to 5 years. The Prince Ding mansion could afford this time, but Shi Ling and Jinan Palace could not. Even though Ting Feng was not his only son, he was the only one with outstanding talent. No matter what, he could not fall into Mo Xiaoyao's hands. Raising his head, Genom of Gojoseon said in a low voice, "My son is not sensible. If he has offended Prince and Princess Consort in any way, I will apologize on his behalf. I hope Prince Ding will be magnanimous." Saying this was showing weakness. Mo Xiaoyao's eyes flashed slightly. He smiled faintly and said, "Prince, your words are too serious. I seem to remember, when Princess Li went out of the city yesterday, she encountered many mysterious people who suddenly appeared in the northwest, so she ordered people to capture them." Princess Li. Yi Li smiled gently and nodded. "Yesterday, many people were captured." Zhuo Jing thought for a while and nodded. There was indeed someone who called himself Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon. But I am familiar with him and am not familiar with Genom of Gojoseon. Furthermore, Genom of Gojoseon was staying in the courier station. Why would he go near Hangzhou? I thought he must be a swindler, so I ordered people to imprison him as well. Young Master Feng San was still dressed in red. His elegant bearing made him look like a noble young master. Yi Li said, "Feng San, is Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon in your hands?" Feng Xiao raised his eyebrows and smiled. He leisurely waved the fan in his hand and said, "Reporting to Princess Consort, this subordinate does not have any Crown Prince in my hands. This subordinate has come to report this matter to Princess Consort Prince. In this subordinate's opinion, these people are daring enough to steal tombs and should be executed. This subordinate suggests that these people be executed in public and their crimes announced to the world." Chapter 494. Genom of Gojoseon's expression was extremely ugly. If Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon was really beheaded for grave robbing, then Jinan Palace and the West Hill would really lose face. However, Feng Xiao still made it sound so dignified that no one could refute him. Because grave robbing was indeed a crime, whether it was in the West Hill or in the Dechu state. But to put it bluntly, this crime was actually targeted at ordinary people and grave robbers. Even if the royal family dug up the tombs of the previous dynasty, who could do anything about it? But now that Lei Tingfeng was in the hands of Mo Xiaoyao, this crime was something that no one could do anything about. Feng Xiao continued his impassioned speech. The Northwest has just been established, and the code of law is not complete yet. It should be punished severely as a warning to others. Moreover, grave robbing is a serious crime that ignores human ethics and disturbs the spirits of the dead. Although it is the imperial tomb of the previous dynasty, if it is not punished severely, it will inevitably give the impression that the Northwest has no human ethics. Prince, please reconsider. Genom of Gojoseon sighed deeply in his heart, knowing that he was going to fall today no matter what. He stood up and saluted Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao. "My son acted recklessly and committed such a heinous crime. Prince Ding and Princess, please forgive him. The West Hill and Jinan Palace are willing to do all we can to compensate the Prince Ding mansion and the Northwest." Hearing this, Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao looked at each other and smiled knowingly. It was a good thing that he was willing to admit defeat. In the end, the matter of Lei Tingfeng was satisfactorily resolved by Genom of Gojoseon's compromise, which included the signing of a 5-year truce agreement between the West Hill and the Mahist army, as well as the establishment of trade between the West Hill and the Northwest and the establishment of a direct trade route to the western region. Furthermore, the West Hill would sell a certain amount of copper and iron ore to the Northwest at a low price every year as compensation for Lei Tingfeng's actions in the Northwest. After coming to the Northwest, it could be said that the South Guarding King didn't gain anything at all. Early the next morning, he left Glass City with Lei Tingfeng and returned to the Western Tomb. However, less than half of the troops that had originally come were left when they returned. Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao did not ask how the Crown Prince and 7th Prince of the Northern Tribes and Dechu State's King Li were going to negotiate, and left it to Su Qingchen and Su Hongyu to handle. Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao were very confident in the abilities of the two of them. Naturally, they were not worried that they would cause the Mo family army to suffer. After Genom of Gojoseon left, Ling Taihan and his sister, who were staying at the Prince Ding mansion, also left together. Although the sickly scholar, who had not recovered from his illness, still looked as pale as before, his breathing seemed to be much better than before. Ling Taihan and Ling Luyue still seemed to be strangely stiff, but that had nothing to do with Yi Li. In a few days, Su Qingchen and Su Hongyu had settled the remaining people. This time, the Mahist army had not only obtained numerous substantial benefits, but also made the nobles of the various countries understand a principle. Even if the Mahist army now only occupied less than 1/6 of the Dechu state's territory, they were still not to be offended. Ever since Mo Xiaoyao announced that he was cutting ties with the Dechu state, the shaky balance between the various countries was once again maintained. Reporting to Wang Fei, Li Wang and Li Wang Fei have come to bid farewell to Wang Fei. After sending away a large group of troublesome people, Yi Li was free and played with Mo Xiaobao. Mo Xiaobao, who had been pregnant for almost 2 months, had become even more adorable. His white and chubby little face had 2 large black crystal eyes. Every time he looked at Yi Li with those watery eyes, she couldn't help but hug him and kiss him. Hearing Qing Luan's report, Yi Li sat up and raised an eyebrow as she asked, "Bid farewell to me?" How come she didn't know that in the eyes of outsiders, she, the Princess Ding, was more important than Prince Ding? If it was because of her relationship with Yi Ying, then from the beginning to the end, she and Yi Ying had never had a sisterly relationship. Qing Luan nodded and said, "Li Wang Fei did say that." Prince and second young master Su left the city early in the morning. They probably won't be able to come back in time to send Li Wang off. Yi Li smiled. Mo Xiaoyao clearly knew that Mo Jingli was leaving today. If he had the intention to send him off, he wouldn't have left the city. Thinking about it, Yi Li waved her hand and said, "Forget it, Li Wang and Wang Fei can wait in the reception pavilion." Qing Luan accepted the order and left. Yi Li changed her clothes before turning to leave. Before she walked out of the inner room, Mo Xiaobao, who was behind her, started to cry out. No one could understand what he was saying. Hearing the sound, Yi Li turned back to look. The little meatball was lying in his swaddling clothes. He reached out his little hand and smiled cutely at Yi Li. His little mouth kept babbling in a language that no one else could understand. Mother Lin smiled and said, "Little Shitzi is afraid that he can't bear to part with Wang Fei." Yi Li looked at Bao Bao's expression and felt very guilty. Bao Bao had been born for almost 2 months, but she didn't spend much time with him. Sometimes, not seeing him for 1 or 2 days was common. It was rare that Mo Xiaobao could still smile at her so intimately every time he saw her. Carefully carrying Bao Bao out of the cradle, Yi Li smiled gently and said, "Bao Bao, be good. Go out with Nyangqin, okay?" Although it was only the 8th month, the weather in the northwest was already cold. When Mother Lin heard that Yi Li wanted to carry Mo Xiaobao out, she hurriedly added a soft and warm blanket over him. She carefully reminded Yi Li not to let the little heir catch a cold from the cold wind. Yi Li complied and carried Mo Xiaobao out of the room. Yi Li carried Mo Xiaobao into the parlor but only saw Mo Jingli sitting in the parlor in a daze. Yi Ying was nowhere to be seen. Yi Li frowned in displeasure. Calling the servant girl who was standing at the door, she asked, "Where did Li Wangfei go?" The servant girl respectfully replied, reporting to Wangfei, "Li Wangfei said that she wanted to go out for a walk and went to the garden. Nubi will go invite her over now." Yi Li nodded but was stopped by Mo Jingli who had stood up. "Wait a moment, there's no need to calling, Yi Li, I have something to discuss with you alone." Yi Li turned to look at the man who was still looking at her with a cold and arrogant expression. She found it funny. Waving her hand to dismiss the servant girl, Yi Li stepped into the hall and asked, "What does Li Wang want to discuss with Ben Fei?" Mo Jingli frowned as he looked at Mo Xiaobao in Yi Li's arms and Wei Lin and Qing Yu who were following behind Yi Li. He said in displeasure, "I want to discuss with you alone." Yi Li looked at him in confusion. "There are no outsiders right now. If you have something to say, just say it." Mo Jingli also understood that Yi Li would not be alone with him. He could only swallow his anger and sit back down. Yi Li sat down on the main seat and carefully placed Mo Xiaobao in her arms. She lightly touched his little hand, causing Mo Xiaobao to giggle and reveal a toothless smile. This warm scene between mother and son was an eyesore in Mo Jingli's eyes. He gave a soft snort and looked at Yi Li to say, "I was wrong to break off the engagement. I apologize to you here." Yi Li stilled and looked in confusion at the solemn Mo Jingli. She turned to look at Wei Lin and Qing Yu. Was Mo Jingli's brain damaged? Wei Lin and Qing Yu also looked like they had seen a ghost. This was not the first day they knew Li Wang. If it was said that he would play some dirty tricks, they would believe it. But if it was said that he would apologize in person, no one had ever seen him do it before. Seeing the disbelieving expressions of the three, Mo Jingli's expression became even uglier. Yi Li was not in the mood to talk about the past with him. She just wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. So she gave a faint smile and nodded, saying, "It's already in the past. Li Wang does not need to mind it." Mo Jingli looked seriously at her and said, "How can I not mind it? I've already investigated the matter in the past. It was Yi Ying who deliberately ruined your reputation in order to enter Li Wang Fu. If it wasn't for this, you would be Li Wang Fei right now." Yi Li instantly felt speechless. At the same time, she felt that she was stupid to think that Mo Jingli would change after experiencing so many things in the past 2 years. Chapter 495. King Li, I think there is a problem that you have never thought of. If I am not willing to break off the engagement, do you really think that the engagement will be broken off so easily? That was the engagement that the late emperor had personally bestowed. How could it be broken off so easily? What do you mean? Mo Jingli looked at Yi Li with dissatisfaction. From Yi Li's words, he could naturally hear the disdain towards him. Yi Li gently hugged Mo Xiaobao and said with a faint smile, "Nothing much. This consort just wants to tell your Highness King Li that what has happened has already happened. There are no ifs in this world and there is nothing that should happen. If King Li does not have any other matters, then please leave. Prince is leaving the city for business this morning and will not be sending King Li and Princess Consort off." Mo Jingli unwillingly stared at Yi Li and said, "You are I's Princess Consort." Yi Li raised her eyes and looked at him indifferently, "Then what does your Highness want? You come with I and I guarantee that you will become King Li's Princess Consort," Mo Jingli said. Yi Li calmly looked at Mo Jingli for a long time before she sneered in disdain. Sensing the disdain and contempt in Yi Li's laughter, Mo Jingli said with a bit of anger and embarrassment, "What are you laughing at?" Yi Li stopped smiling and calmly asked, "Your Highness King Li, do you dare to take me away from Glass City?" Hearing this, Mo Jingli's expression changed. She quickly glanced at Wei Lin, who was standing behind Yi Li, and her face turned green and white. Yi Li leisurely leaned back in the chair and hugged Mo Xiaobao while teasing him. She said with a smile, "What does King Li mean by saying this? Or is it that King Li's courage and daring have reached the point where you dare to steal Princess Ding in the northwest? If it is really like this, then this consort will have a whole new level of respect for you. But even if it is like this, why should this consort go with you? Princess Li. Does this consort care if it's very valuable?" Mo Jingli clenched his fists tightly and stared at Yi Li. "Is Mo Xiaoyao that good to you? You'd rather follow him regardless of everything? He's just using you." Yi Li raised her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "Xiaoyao is naturally good to me. Who in the world doesn't know that I am his only wife, that I am in charge of the Prince Ding mansion and half of the Mahist army, and that I am in charge of the most mysterious and elite Qilin in the world? These, can you give them to me? Do you dare to give it to me? Could it be that Prince Li doesn't want to use me? Don't you want the Yunzhou Su clan behind me? Don't you want my Qilin?" Having been mercilessly exposed, Mo Jingli's expression turned ugly. After a long time, he gritted his teeth and said, "The Mahist army can be said to be the enemy of the entire world. Yi Li, I am doing this for your own good. Don't be ungrateful. Yi Li said indifferently, this consort appreciates Prince Li's kindness. Prince Li has also waited for a long time. The two of you should leave as soon as possible. This consort won't see you off. Everyone turned their eyes to the door. Yi Ying had appeared at the door at some point and was staring at them with a strange expression. Mo Jingli's face flashed with a trace of uneasiness. He stood up and said, when did you come back? Yi Ying stared at him for a long time before saying indifferently, just now. Your Highness, now that you've said your goodbyes to third sister, shouldn't we set off now? Mo Jingli looked at Yi Li with some reluctance, but saw that Yi Li was playing with the baby in her arms. He nodded and said, let's go. Without saying goodbye to Yi Li, he walked past Yi Ying and left. Yi Ying looked back at Yi Li and said with a complicated expression, third sister, goodbye. Yi Li nodded and said quietly, I won't see you off. After Yi Ying walked out of the door, Yi Li sighed softly. Qing Yu, who was serving beside her, comforted her softly, Prince Li has always been self-righteous. Why should Princess be angry with him? Yi Li shook her head and said with a smile, I'm not angry with him. I'm just a little emotional. When Yi Ying was still in the boudoir, she was so proud and spoiled. But now... Actually, when Mo Jingli said that Yi Li would become Prince Li's Di-Fei, Yi Ying was already outside the door. If it was in the past, Yi Ying would have cried and made a fuss. But now, when faced with this kind of problem, Yi Ying had learned to remain silent. It seemed that there was no one in this world who would never change. Qing Yu said with a smile, in the past, fourth young miss was the daughter of the minister, the younger sister of the Jiaoyi. She was also a famous beauty in the capital. Naturally, she was insufferably arrogant. Moreover, Prince Li was only an ordinary prince at that time. But now, Prince Li occupies half of the most prosperous part of the Dechu state and is on par with the emperor. The Yi family has long declined. How could fourth young miss dare to make a fuss with Prince Li? The Prince Li of today is no longer the Prince Li of the past who always favors fourth young Mississippi. Yi Li smiled. Wasn't that so? Mo Jingli even brought Princess Xixia to the northwest. It could be seen that Yi Ying's position in his heart was just a so-so. If it wasn't for her relationship with Yi Ying and the fact that she gave birth to a son for Mo Jingli, she would have been thrown to some corner by Mo Jingli. After the various countries' envoys left, Glass City gradually regained its peace. But at the same time, many merchants came to Glass City and even the entire Northwest to settle down. Many of the citizens who had fled to the Great Pass to escape the disaster of war gradually moved back. The entire Northwest, under the efforts of the Prince Ding Mansion, did not become chaotic because of the sudden announcement of breaking off relations with the Dechu state. Instead, it gradually got on the right track. When Yi Li finally let out a sigh of relief, Su Qingze and Qin Zheng's wedding date finally arrived. Although Su Qingze was the first person in the Su family to get married in this generation, the Su family, from Mr. Qingyun to Su Qingze and Qin Zheng, emphasized that the wedding should be simple. Qin Zheng became General Zhang Qilan's godfather and got married from General Zhang's residence. For Qin Zheng's wedding, Murong Ting, who was originally far away in the Dechu state, also left Leng Haoyu and hurried over, just in time for Qin Zheng's wedding. In General Zhang's residence, in the boudoir specially prepared for Qin Zheng, Yi Li and Murong Ting looked at Qin Zheng, who had just changed into a bright red wedding dress and looked particularly beautiful and dazzling. Murong Ting pulled Qin Zheng and praised, fortunately, I made it in time. Otherwise, I would have missed Zheng He's beautiful and moving moment. I'm really moved. I'm afraid that second young Master Su, that blockhead, will be dumbfounded. Murong. Qin Zheng blushed and glared at Murong Ting coquettishly. The red wedding dress made her look even more delicate than flowers. For Su Qingze and Qin Zheng's wedding, Yi Li, who usually wore plain clothes, also changed into a bright yellow dress embroidered with hibiscus branches. Standing in front of Qin Zheng, she looked at her and nodded with a smile, Murong is right. Indeed, people are more delicate than flowers. Second brother is really lucky to be able to marry sister Zheng. Qin Zheng looked at the two of them helplessly and said unwillingly, Li, even you are teasing me. Yi Li quickly covered her mouth and laughed. I don't dare. After today, Zheng will be my second sister-in-law. How would I dare to tease second sister-in-law, isn't that right, sister-in-law? There was a burst of cheerful laughter in the boudoir. Murongting turned around and took out a large sandalwood box from her luggage and handed it to Qin Zheng. Qin Zheng looked at her in confusion. This is... Murongting said, before I left, Madame Qin sent someone to send it over. She said that she left in a hurry and didn't do anything. She didn't even give you a dowry. Madame Qin and Lord Qin personally arranged these. They said that they were your dowry. The originally joyful atmosphere in the boudoir gradually faded. Qin Zheng held the box and tears immediately fell. Murongting immediately panicked and hurriedly took out her handkerchief to wipe Qin Zheng's tears. Today is your good day. How can you cry? I didn't want to make you cry. Li, Unable to persuade Qin Zheng, Murongting could only look helplessly at Yi Li. She really didn't want to make Qin Zheng cry, but the dowry from the Qin family must be handed over to Zheng before the ceremony. Chapter 496. Yi Li walked to Qin Zheng's side and sat down. She patted her shoulder and comforted her softly, Sister Zheng, don't ruin your makeup. Lord Qin and Madame Qin want Murong to send the dowry from afar. It's their love. You should be happy. Qin Zheng nodded repeatedly, but how could her tears be stopped so easily? Yi Li sighed and patted Qin Zheng. Forget it. If you want to cry, cry to your heart's content. After you're done crying, we'll put on more beautiful makeup. But don't cry until your eyes are swollen. It'll be terrible if you scare my second brother. Pfft. Hearing Yi Li's comforting words, Murongting couldn't help but burst out laughing. She glared at Yi Li and said, Li, are you comforting Zheng, or telling a joke? Even Qin Zheng couldn't help but laugh. Her beautiful face was a bit embarrassed. In front of Yi Li and Murongting, Qin Zheng carefully opened the box that represented her parents' intentions. Lord Qin and Madame Qin were very thoughtful. The main thing was that the mountain was high and the road was long. Murongting couldn't bring too many things. So the most in the box was banknotes. In addition to 2 banknotes worth 10,000 taels, there were nearly 1,000 taels of banknotes and silver fragments. In addition, there were 3 small boxes full of all kinds of jewelry. With these, even if Qin Zheng didn't do anything, it was enough for her to have enough clothes and food for the rest of her life. Qin Zheng hugged the box, her clear eyes filled with tears. She said softly, Father and Mother have done so much for me. Unfortunately, I'm unfilial, even getting married, silly. As long as you're well, Uncle Qin and Auntie will naturally be at ease. One day, the family will be reunited. Yi Li said. Murongting nodded and said, that's right. After your wedding, I still have to return to the capital. At that time, write a letter and I'll help you bring it back to Uncle Qin and Auntie Qin. Don't worry, we will naturally take care of the 2 elders in the capital. Qin Zheng nodded and wiped her tears. She said with some shame, thank you, Li and Murongting. Murongting smiled and said, what are you thanking us for? Aren't we friends? Yi Li laughed and said, all right, Heroine Murong, your friend is about to go overboard. Go and add these things to the dowry list. Just say that it's a dowry from Zheng's parents. Qin Zheng's dowry was prepared by the general's mansion. Yi Li and the Prince Ding mansion had also sent a lot of dowry, which was not thin. But in the end, the dowry given by the biological parents had a different meaning. Murongting had just made Qin Zheng cry and was eager to have something for her to do. She took the list from Yi Li and hurriedly turned to do it. The 2 of them smiled as they watched Murongting leave happily. They couldn't help but smile at each other. The sadness from before had also faded a lot. The groom is here to escort the bride. The bride is going out. The bridesmaid's joyful voice came from outside the door. Yili lowered her head to check Qin Zheng's makeup. She personally took the red veil and covered Qin Zheng with it. Zheng, I wish you happiness. Thank you, Qin Zheng said softly. After Qin Zheng and Su Qing's wedding, Glass City seemed to have completely calmed down. In the outside world, no matter how much the northern militants Yelu Hong and Yelu Yi fought openly and secretly, or how Imo Jingqi and Imo Jingli were at odds on the surface, or how Genom of Gojoseon's seemingly stable rule and the emperor of Shiling's clan were restless, it did not affect the peace of the northwest. With the protection of hundreds of thousands of Mahist army and Prince Ding appointing Su Qingchen and a group of talented young people to reform, the citizens of the Northwest felt incomparably peaceful and happy under the protection of the Prince Ding mansion. If they had been worried about their fate after breaking off relations with the Dechu state, most of them would not be willing to return to the Dechu state now. In the hearts of the citizens, Prince Ding and Princess Ding, who could let them live a peaceful and worry-free life, were the ones they truly supported. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. Inside the Prince Ding mansion, a small child wearing an ink-colored brocade robe with a dragon pattern embroidered with silver threads was walking slowly along the corridor. Although his white and tender little face tried to make a solemn expression, it was still so adorable that people could not help but want to reach out and pinch him. The child had a pair of beautiful eyes that were like black pearls. Coupled with his solemn expression that was like a little adult's, it was as exquisite as snow and jade. At such a young age, he already revealed a stunning elegance and handsomeness. The people following behind him were all frowning as they looked at the little master in front of them. They looked like they wanted to persuade him but did not dare to open their mouths. As if he felt the resentment behind him, the child turned his head and glanced at the people following behind him. He snorted disdainfully and said, "This prince said that you don't need to follow me." What? This prince's words are not effective. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines and couldn't help but cry in their hearts. Little prince, where did you learn this tone of voice from? It's very scary, isn't it? That. Prince, the prince instructed you to copy the biography of Prince Ding 10 times. The prince wants to check it when he comes back. The attendant quickly reminded him. The child squinted his round eyes and said calmly, "I understand. You can leave now. I'm going to pay my respects to my mother." Everyone looked at each other, not knowing how to deal with this matter. It was impossible to not let the little prince pay respects to the princess. No one could say that the little prince was filial to his mother. But if they let the little prince go, the little prince would most likely refuse to do the homework that the prince had given them. When the prince came back, they would be the unlucky ones. Humph! The little prince snorted heavily. He knew that his lord father did not have good intentions in arranging so many people by his side. Mother was his. How could that old man snatch her away just because he wanted to? The little prince glanced disdainfully at the attendants. He flung his sleeves and walked briskly towards his mother. In the study, Yili sat behind the desk and seriously looked at the booklet that had just been presented to her. 5 years of time did not leave too many traces on her body. Compared to 5 years ago, she was now in her 20s. The experience of being in a position of power made her more dazzling and graceful. Yili closed the booklet in her hands and looked up at Qin Feng, who was standing in front of her. She asked, "The changes and reorganization of the Mahist army are almost complete. How is Qilin?" Qin Feng smiled and said, "Princess consort, please do not worry. Now, Qilin has a total of 2,000 soldiers under his command. Every one of them is the best of the best, carefully selected and cultivated." Yili smiled and said, "Elites are not made just by words. The Northwest has been too peaceful these past few years. The Mahist army has just been reorganized. In the past few years, there have been many new soldiers who have never been on the battlefield. I'm just afraid that the strength of the Mahist army will decrease instead of increase." Qin Feng smiled and said, "Princess consort worries too much. Even though the new soldiers have never been on the battlefield, the prince and the generals have been strictly trained and have never slacked off. As for the problem of experience, they will be able to adapt after going on the battlefield once or twice. Yili nodded and looked at Qin Feng. Qin Feng had followed Yili for many years and had some understanding of the changes in Yili's expressions. He asked curiously, "Does Princess Consort have any ideas?" Yili tapped her index finger and nodded. She said in a low voice, "I do have some ideas, but whether they can be implemented or not is debatable." Qin Feng respectfully said, "This subordinate is willing to hear the details." Chapter 497. Yili pursed her lips into a smile and said, "To prevent the soldiers from not being on the battlefield for too long and becoming rusty. How about, we have a military drill?" "Military drill?" Qin Feng said with some curiosity. Although it sounded very strange, he could understand the meaning of Princess Consort's words from her words. In reality, every country had some drills when training their armies. For example, navy drills, troop formations, and various military drills. But Qin Feng felt that Wang Fei would give a more interesting method. Yili nodded. She smiled as she thought, "That's right. Qin Feng, go back and see which place in the northwest is suitable for this kind of large-scale drill." Qin Feng raised an eyebrow. "Do you need a big place?" "The newly built Mahist Army Drill 50 li outside of Li City should be big enough." Yili shook her head and said with a smile, "I don't want that kind of place, I want a battlefield." "Battlefield?" Qin Feng was shocked. "Wang Fei's meaning is?" Yili nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, the terrain is complex and the territory is vast. It is a place that can support a true battle. I want a joint drill with many different types of soldiers. Not just the Mahist army, but also the Black Cloud Cavalry. Even Qi Lin must participate." Qin Feng imagined the scene that Yili described in his mind and suddenly felt his blood boil. He immediately responded in a clear voice, "Wang Fei, don't worry. This subordinate will definitely find a suitable place." Yili nodded in satisfaction and said, "Very good. Go and do your work. I will discuss this matter with the prince later. Before this, keep it a secret." This subordinate obeys. Qin Feng's handsome face was filled with an excited smile. He really had been too idle these past few years. Even though the drill was not a true battlefield, Qin Feng felt it was very interesting to hear Wang Fei's words. "Mu Fei." There was the sound of a child's light footsteps and a soft call from outside the door. The smile on Yili's face became even gentler. As soon as she raised her head, she saw her baby walk in with an aggrieved expression, looking at her pitifully. Qin Feng, who was standing at the side, twitched his mouth and retreated to the side. "Greetings, Your Highness." Mo Xiaobao noticed that there were outsiders in the study and his aggrieved expression froze. Yili smiled and said, "Baby, what's wrong?" Mo Xiaobao directly ignored Qin Feng, turned around the large desk, and threw himself into Yili's arms. His little face rubbed against Yili's body. "Mu Fei. I'm not called Bao Bao. Chen has grown up." Yili reached out to pick up Mo Xiaobao and let him sit in her embrace. She raised her hand to tap his little head and said with a smile, "Okay, sorry, Mu Fei forgot again." Why did Chen come to find Mu Fei? It had to be said, the ability to imperceptibly influence others was very scary. "Good child." Yili rubbed her son's small head and smiled. Mo Xiaobao immediately smiled and nodded, saying, "This child is the most obedient, this child loves mother the most." Yili lowered her head and kissed his forehead. She smiled and said, "Mother also loves Chen the most." Standing to the side and watching the interaction between mother and son, Qin Feng inwardly shook his head. "Little Shitzi, every time the prince wasn't here, you would pretend to be pitiful and get close to Wang Fei. When the prince came back, you would be chased away and punished again. Was there any meaning? The prince has returned." The sound of a maid greeting came from outside the door. Qin Feng glanced at little Shitzi, who was still in Wang Fei's arms, and quickly left. Wang Fei, subordinate, will leave first. Yi Li nodded and said, go. Mo Xiaoyao stepped into the room and saw his son sitting in Yi Li's arms like a well-behaved child. He unconsciously frowned. She was dressed in white and had a head of snow-white silver hair, which made her seem cold and aloof. However, when he saw his wife sitting behind the desk, his slightly cold eyes became a little warmer. Lily, what are you talking about? Yi Li patted Mo Xiaobao and raised her head with a smile, replying, nothing, Chen, just came to greet me. Mo Xiaobao unwillingly came down from his mother's arms and walked forward to greet his father. This son greets Fu Wang. Mo Xiaoyao looked down at him for a moment and then bent down to pick him up so he was at eye level. Come to greet your mother? Xiaobao is really filial. Fu Wang is very gratified. Being held in his father's arms, Mo Xiaobao immediately struggled. But with his little strength, he couldn't break free from Mo Xiaoyao's hands. Mo Xiaoyao held him in his arms. Mo Xiaobao used all his strength and his face was red, but he couldn't move those iron-like arms. Chen, what's wrong? With Mo Xiaoyao blocking her view, Yi Li didn't see her son's struggle. She just found it strange that her son, who always liked to jump into her arms, was blushing in Mo Xiaoyao's arms. Mo Xiaoyao looked lovingly at his son and said with a smile, it seems that Xiaobao already knows how to be shy. He has grown up. Chapter 498. Yi Li raised an eyebrow. Was it like this? Mo Xiaobao knew that he could not shake his father's power and could only pretend to be shy as he lay in his father's arms, confirming Mo Xiaoyao's words. Mo Xiaoyao carried Mo Xiaobao and sat down beside Yi Li. Yi Li got up and poured a cup of tea for him, asking, how is the army camp outside the city? Mo Xiaoyao took a sip of the tea, saying, there are no problems, the hard work of these years has not been wasted. I saw Qin Feng leave in a hurry. Did Li Li tell him something? Yi Li nodded, telling Mo Xiaoyao the idea she had told Qin Feng. Mo Xiaoyao was very interested in this idea, military drill. Li Li's ideas are always very strange. Compared to those exercises that are just for show, this idea is indeed much more interesting. Yi Li nodded with a smile. This method doesn't just test the normal soldiers, it also tests the commanding generals. Didn't we specially select a group of young generals to teach them these few years? We need to see how effective it is. If we get a group of armchair commanders, it's better to just throw them into the battlefield and kill them. Mo Xiaoyao nodded in agreement, saying, this is very good. Li Li, write down the plan and I'll look at it later, then let people prepare it. But since it's a war between two armies, there will definitely be a supreme commander. Does Li Li have any ideas in mind? Who will lead the army? Yi Li nodded with a smile, saying, I've thought about it. How about you personally lead one army? Mo Xiaoyao was startled, putting down the teacup and looking at Yi Li, asking, then what about the other side? Yi Li pursed her lips into a smile, saying, I'll lead the other side. General Zhang and General Liu are both old generals, they will be the observers and judges. Also, it's just in case. Mo Xiaoyao thought for a moment, then nodded in agreement with Yi Li's plan, saying, good, they all say that Li Li is a genius, I also want to see how he leads the army. Hearing this, Yi Li could only helplessly smile. In terms of talent, who in the world could compare to Mo Xiaoyao? Not to mention a dabbler like her. But she would not arrange a one-sided drill, at least, it would be interesting if both sides were balanced, right? Mo Xiaobao sat in his father's arms, listening to his father and mother talking. Even though he did not understand, he still quietly listened. From time to time, he blinked his big eyes. In Yi Li's eyes, he was extremely adorable. She reached out to Mo Xiaoyao and said, give me Chen. Mo Xiaobao was overjoyed, quickly reaching out his small hands to his mother. Mo Xiaoyao slightly moved to the side, letting Mo Xiaobao be further away from his mother. He said to Yi Li, he's already 5 years old, he's not light, be careful not to tire you. Moreover, it's not good for a child to always be carried by others. I haven't been carried by anyone since I was 2 years old. Yi Li could only helplessly look at her son. Mo Xiaobao gritted his teeth in his heart. Mo Xiaoyao casually said, "When we returned to the city, we went outside the city to pay a visit to Mr. Qingyun. Mr. Qingyun said that Mo Xiaobao is already 5 years old, he can be enlightened." Yi Li blinked, somewhat puzzled. Didn't we enlighten Chen already? Even though her own child was not yet 5 years old, but he had already learned most of the children's books in the 1,000-character classic. In Yi Li's previous life, when she was 5 years old, she was still playing games with the teacher in kindergarten and learning A and B. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head to look at his son's well-intentioned smile, but Mo Xiaobao only felt a cold wind blowing over his head. "Li, you're a girl, so the Su family's teachings were not strict. But you can ask the young masters of the Su family, which one of them didn't learn to read at the age of 2 or 3, and should have started formal school at the age of 4 or 5. If not, how could the people of the Su family all pass the imperial examinations before the age of 20? You have to know, it's already very rare for an ordinary person to pass the imperial examinations at the age of 24 or 25. Since Xiao Bao is the heir of the Prince Ding mansion, he will have to bear more responsibilities in the future than others. If we're too lenient with him, we'll be harming him." Yi Li was speechless. Was this considered not letting the child lose at the starting line? Who said that the children in her previous life and modern life had it hard? The children of the Su family were the ones who really had it hard. When Mo Xiaoyao mentioned it, Yi Li also realized that the descendants of the Su family all passed the imperial examinations before the age of 20. For example, the eldest brother, Su Qingchen, passed the imperial examinations at the age of 14. Didn't he have to start learning at the age of 2 or 3? Looking at her son with some reluctance, Yi Li sighed softly and said, "I only hope that Chen can have a happy and worry-free childhood." Childhood? What was that? Why did his son have something he didn't have? Mo Xiaoyao's heart was filled with jealousy, but he still smiled gently. In today's world, it's better for Xiao Bao to be mature early than for him to be ignorant when we can't protect him in the future, isn't it? Moreover, with Master Qingyun personally teaching him, are you still worried? Although Master Qingyun is strict with his children and grandchildren, he dotes on Xiao Bao the most. Are you still afraid that he'll be tired? Yi Li thought about it and agreed. If Master Qingyun was the second most doted on Xiao Bao in the whole Northwest, no one would dare to be the first. Even Master Qingyun's great-grandson, Su Qingze, and Qin Zheng's 4-year-old son, Su Zhirue, had to stand aside. "Well, Chen, when you go to Taigong, you have to be obedient, okay? Mother will go to see you every other day, okay?" Xiao Bao listlessly crawled in Mo Xiaoyao's arms, and in his heart, he despised his despicable father. "Don't you just want to drive me out? Humph. When this young master grows up, let's see what you old man can use to snatch mother from me." Mother. Woo, you have to wait for Chen to grow up. Chen will definitely snatch you back. Xiao Bao took his usual luggage and sadly went to Taigong, who doted on him the most. Although he lost the battle to fight for his mother again, Xiao Bao firmly believed that it was because he was still too young and his father used force to bully him. Moreover, he secretly made up his mind that since the old man shamelessly bullied the young, then when he grew up, he wouldn't mind bullying the old man as the young. After sending Xiao Bao to the newly built Lishan Academy not far from Li City, Yi Li didn't feel good when she saw her son standing next to Master Qingyun and looking at her pitifully. Speaking of which, as a mother, she was really too irresponsible. Fortunately, Xiao Bao was close to her since he was young. Yi Li thought about it. In the future, it would be best to come and see her son every day and then make some pastries that he liked to eat and send them over. When Xiao Bao was a little older and didn't have to worry about going back and forth every day, she would let him go back to the Prince Ding mansion every day. It wasn't good for a child to not see his parents all the time. "Li, didn't you say that you would come and see Xiao Bao every other day? Master Qingyun will teach him well, don't worry." Mo Xiaoyao hugged Yi Li and comforted her softly. "I will double the number of shadow guards in Lishan Academy and Qi Lin has a team stationed nearby. You don't have to worry about Xiao Bao's safety." Yi Li sighed helplessly. She really didn't understand why Mo Xiaoyao was so against Xiaobao. Every time he saw Xiaobao sticking to her side, he would definitely torment the child. Although she knew that Mo Xiaoyao knew his limits and wouldn't really hurt Xiaobao, Yili was still speechless when she saw Xiaobao's red and pitiful face every time he was bullied. Xiaoyao, do you really hate Chen that much? Chapter 499. Mo Xiaoyao looked innocently at Yi Li and smiled. Xiaobao is my son, how could I dislike him? Li, I'm doing this for the sake of Xiaobao's future. Everyone says that a strict teacher produces a brilliant disciple, and a good rod produces a filial son. If you don't be strict with Xiaobao, when he grows up to be like the brothers Mo Jingqi and Mo Jingli, won't you be sad to death? Yi Li looked at him speechlessly. After a while, she said, Prince Xiaobao grew up being played by father and big brother? Mo Xiaoyao smiled but didn't say anything. His father was so busy in the past that he didn't have the time to care about them. Big brother was really strict with him. In comparison, Mo Xiaoyao didn't think that he was too strict with Xiaobao. Compared to when I was 5 years old and had to wake up before the sun rose to practice martial arts, Xiaobao, you should be satisfied. I really am a loving father. With this comparison, Prince Ding felt that he was very loving to his son and that it was Li Li who spoiled him too much that she had a problem with it. It was wrong for parents to spoil their children. The two walked down the mountain hand in hand and bumped into Su Qingchen, who was coming up from the bottom of the mountain. Young Master Qingchen, who was nearing his prime, was dressed in a white robe. Compared to before, he looked more mature and elegant. Although eldest aunt already had a grandson in the past few years, she was even more anxious about Big Brother's marriage. However, Big Brother didn't seem to care at all. She had never heard of him looking at any girl differently. It was normal for him to be unwilling to get married early. In the Su family, other than Su Qingze who had been engaged since young, the others hadn't married yet. However, it was strange for him to be completely unmoved. Sometimes, even Yi Li thought that her cousin, who was exceptionally outstanding in all aspects, was preparing to become an immortal. Big brother, you're here to pay respects to grandfather? Yi Li greeted first. Su Qingchen looked at the two of them holding hands, and a teasing smile appeared on her lips. Unfortunately, Mo Xiaoyao's skin was thicker than he had imagined. He held Yi Li's hand without changing his expression. Su Qingchen shook his head helplessly. He raised his hand and waved a purple gold scroll with complicated patterns on it. He said, there is a matter. I heard that the prince and Wang Fei are not preparing to return to the city in the next 2 days, so I have to come personally. Fortunately, we met here. Yi Li looked at Mo Xiaoyao suspiciously. How come she didn't know that they wouldn't be returning to the city for the next 2 days? Mo Xiaoyao's expression did not change as he looked at the booklet in Su Qingchen's hand. From Nanzhao? How did you know? Yi Li asked curiously. Mo Xiaoyao pointed at the flourishing patterns on the booklet. That is the pattern used by the Nanzhao Imperial House. Yi Li frowned as she thought back. She seemed to have seen this pattern in Nanzhao before. She couldn't help but feel ashamed of her ignorance. Yi Li took the booklet and asked, is Big Brother coming down the mountain with us or going to pay respects to grandfather first? Su Qingchen shook his head and sighed. I just saw grandfather yesterday. The old man is angry and doesn't want to see me. Let's go down the mountain together. Yi Li was slightly shocked. Big Brother was the most outstanding member of the Su family. Supposedly, he was grandfather's favorite grandson. How could grandfather be so angry that he was unwilling to see him? Mo Xiaoyao raised an eyebrow and chuckled. It's probably because eldest young Master Su is too picky about marriage and has caused the heavens to be angry. Even Mr. Qingyun, with his good upbringing, can't stand it. Su Qingchen glanced coolly at Mo Xiaoyao. Speaking of angering the heavens, was there anyone more outrageous than Prince Ding? He didn't do what he should, but insisted on doing what he shouldn't. It was one thing to throw his son to grandfather, but he actually wanted to sneak away with Li Er. If he hadn't gotten the news quickly, a certain person would have taken Li to God knows where to roam. Speaking of which, it's time for Big Brother to get married. Eldest aunt has told me many times. It's a pity that Big Brother doesn't like the young ladies of the Northwest. Who knows how many young ladies' hearts have been broken. As Yili joked, she casually flipped open the purple gold booklet. She couldn't help but let out a sound of surprise. What's wrong? Mo Xiaoyao asked with concern. Yili waved the booklet and glanced at Su Qingchen. Princess Anxi is getting married. She's invited us to attend the wedding in Nanzhao. Mo Xiaoyao wasn't surprised. Princess Anxi is already 24 years old. Even in Nanjiang, she should have gotten married long ago. What's so strange about it? Yili nodded in agreement. Ever since Princess Anxi left after staying in Glass City for a few days 5 years ago, Yili knew that there was no hope for her and Su Qingchen. Yili still remembered that day when she personally sent Princess Anxi out of the city. Looking at Princess Anxi's back as she left, even she couldn't help but want to beat Su Qingchen up. But in the end, she also understood that she couldn't blame Su Qingchen. When it came to matters of the heart, it was always up to people to decide. Mo Xiaoyao took the booklet and flipped through it. As expected, it was a letter of credence from Nanzhao. It's still early. The wedding date is set for July. If the journey is fast, we can still make it in early July. After reading it, he was no longer interested. He casually returned the booklet to Su Qingchen and smiled. I'll have to trouble Big Brother to take care of these matters. Li, a few days ago, Qingbai and Qingyan wrote a letter saying that the wheat in the north is growing exceptionally well this year. Right now is the time for the ears to bloom. Why don't we go take a look? Yili finally understood. No wonder Big Brother said that if he came late, he wouldn't be able to find her. It turned out that Mo Xiaoyao had sent Xiao Bao to grandfather's place because he wanted to take her out with him. Su Qingchen closed the booklet and looked calmly at Mo Xiaoyao. Prince, I'm afraid you won't be able to go far in the short term. Why? Mo Xiaoyao was displeased. His snow-white hair fluttered in the breeze. I have worked hard these few years. It wasn't easy to raise Mo Xiaobao. It wasn't easy to settle the matters in the Northwest. Can't I rest? Hearing this, Yili and Su Qingchen both looked at him with disdain. He actually had the nerve to say that he raised Mo Xiaobao. If he didn't torment Mo Xiaobao from time to time, it would have been easier for him to grow up. Su Qingchen smiled calmly. Reporting to Prince, in another 10 days, it will be the first time the Northwest will hold a competition to select talents. We have prepared for 4 whole years. We can't possibly not have Prince present for the first time, right? At that time, it will give people the impression that we don't care about the world's students. Or is it that Prince has the confidence to rush back from Fourth Brother's place in 10 days? In addition, even if this matter didn't happen, Father has already told me about the tax reform plan for the Northwest region that he submitted the day before yesterday. He wanted me to ask His Highness if there was anything wrong with it that caused His Highness to delay in replying. Also, the annual Glass City Chamber of Commerce is about to start. Merchants from various countries have already started to arrive in Glass City. Prince. Mo Xiaoyao looked dumbfounded at Su Qingchen, who seemed to have endless things to say. He couldn't help but feel his teeth ache. He simply wanted to go up and grab Su Qingchen's collar and shake him. Didn't I leave all the matters in the Northwest to you guys to handle? Why are there still so many things that I have to personally handle? Looking at Mo Xiaoyao's ashen face, Yili couldn't help but cover her mouth and secretly laugh. She gave Mo Xiaoyao a helpless look. It's not that I don't want to go out with you to play, but you don't have time to go out and play. In fact, the reason why there were so many things, there was definitely a part of it that Su Qingchen did it on purpose. Perhaps he learned the lesson of riding a tiger and not being able to back down after so many years of the Su family. Although the Su family had Mo Xiaoyao's deep trust, they had always carefully avoided matters of power. Other than Su Qingfeng, the other members of the Su family never asked about the military affairs of the Mahist army. Although they relied heavily on Su Hongyan, Su Hongyu, and Su Qingchen, they rarely participated in matters that would make them famous. Otherwise, they would use Mo Xiaoyao as a cover and push all the credit and reputation to Prince Mo Xiaoyao. Su Hongyu even asked Master Qingyun to set a new family rule. In the future, the children of the Su family who became officials would have to retire at the age of 58. In order to prevent Lishan Academy from being the only one in power, Su Hongyan had done his best to support and build several academies in the northwest. This changed the situation of the northwest where there wasn't a single good academy. The Su family's actions expressed their attitude. Yili could only sigh softly in her heart and accept their kindness. Chapter 500. If Prince really feels tired, why don't you rest for a few days when you go to Nanzhao? In any case, Prince won't have anything to do in Nanzhao. When Su Qingchen finally finished speaking, she glanced at Mo Xiaoyao's indignant expression before adding leisurely. Wife, it's not that your husband isn't considerate and doesn't want to accompany you to relax. It's just that eldest brother-in-law is too fierce. Wife, you have to make a decision for your husband. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yili plaintively. Yili looked amusedly at Mo Xiaoyao, who didn't look old at all with his snow-white hair. He was clearly a man in his early 30s, but he looked younger than when they first met. Okay, husband, don't be sad. Let's go to Nanzhao and play for a few more days. Leave everything to eldest brother and the others. Hearing this, Mo Xiaoyao glanced provocatively at Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen pretended not to see. She looked up at the sky and said indifferently, Li, it's okay to spoil your husband, but spoiling him too much will easily damage your brain. Eldest brother, your maternal grandfather, and uncle will all be distressed. If others don't know, they'll think you gave birth to twins. Listen to eldest brother, this husband should be wise and powerful. Yili looked left and right. She wisely decided not to speak. In this world, it wasn't only men who found it difficult to be sandwiched between their wife and mother. It was also difficult for women to be sandwiched between their husband and eldest brother. She smiled gently, eldest brother and prince, take your time to chat. I seem to see that Qin Feng has something to say to me. After speaking, she didn't look at the two's expressions and walked down the mountain first. Behind her, Su Qingchen's smile was like a spring breeze. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his brows in deep thought. Could it be that Li really did like Ai's wise and powerful appearance, so she left so quickly? Turning back to glance at a certain person who was like a banished immortal, Prince Ding sneered maliciously in his heart. Destroying the relationship between I and Li. If I don't marry you off as soon as possible, I will be sorry for you and your family. Young Master Qing Chen, who was smiling elegantly, shuddered for no reason. He couldn't help but raise his head to look at the cloudless sky. Although there was still some time before Princess Anshi's wedding, they didn't have much time to prepare. Just as Su Qingchen had said, Yili and Mo Xiaoyao still had a lot of things to deal with. Moreover, this trip to Nanjiang would take at least a month. Prince Ding and Princess Consort were not around at the same time, so there were more things that needed to be accounted for. As expected, the moment he returned to the residence, Mo Xiaoyao was invited to the study by Su Hongyu, who had been waiting for him. She smiled as she watched Mo Xiaoyao leave the study. When Yili returned to her courtyard, she found that there was someone waiting for her. Eldest aunt, why are you here? Is something the matter? Seeing Yili come in, Madame Su hurriedly got up. Yili went over to help Madame Su sit down and said with a smile, Aunt, if you have something to say, just sit down. There are no outsiders, why are you being so polite with me? Did I disturb you by coming here? Madame Su asked worriedly. Although she was a woman of the inner courtyard, Madame Su knew that her niece, as Princess Ding, was different from other women of the inner courtyard and even other princess consorts. However, in the hearts of the people in the northwest, Princess Ding's name was almost as famous as Prince Ding's. For example, Prince Ding's subordinates and even the generals of the Mahist army were all obedient to Yi Li. Yi Li said with a smile, "Aunt, don't say that. I usually help out and don't have time to visit you. Eldest aunt and second aunt also don't come to visit me. I know that eldest aunt is spending all your time on my three brothers and doesn't care about me." Madame Su couldn't help but laugh at Yi Li's teasing, but soon her eyebrows were dyed with worry again. She smiled bitterly and said helplessly, "Your second aunt is really satisfied now that she has a grandson. She spends all her time on Rui. But I'm really worried all day long." Yi Li understood and asked softly, "Is it because of eldest brother's matter? Who else could it be other than him?" Madame Su sighed. In the blink of an eye, Qin Chen is almost 30 years old, but he doesn't even have a girl he likes. Your eldest brother has never made anyone worry about him since he was young, but he is the most worrisome person in this matter. If I had known this, I would have followed your second uncle and arranged a child marriage for him. Regardless of whether it's good or bad, he should at least get me a wife." Yi Li also sighed. Big brother's matter was indeed worrying. Logically speaking, the Su family was definitely an open-minded family. Except for Su Qingze, who was engaged to Qin Zheng when he was young, the other brothers didn't get engaged early. Naturally, this was so that they could carefully choose a daughter-in-law, lest their son marry a wife he didn't like or wasn't virtuous. Even Su Qingchen, who was over 20 years old and hadn't married, the Su family didn't force him. But now that he was about to turn 30, it was no wonder that Madame Su was anxious. Eldest brother's standards are too high. There's nothing we can do if he doesn't like ordinary girls. Yi Li sighed softly. Not to mention Su Qingchen himself, even Yi Li felt that there weren't many girls who could match up to her eldest brother. The only one who was somewhat interesting was Princess Anxi, but her eldest brother didn't like her. High standards? Does he want to marry a fairy? Madame Su couldn't help but wipe her tears and complain angrily. Does he think he's so great just because people call him the first young master in the world? Does he think that all the women in the world can't enter his eyes? He's not even an ordinary person with 2 eyes and 1 nose. Look at him, not to mention that he's already so old. In another 2 years, which girl from a good family would be willing to marry someone who's so much older than her? Because he set a bad example, now your second uncles Qing Feng, Qing Bai, and Qing Yan are all refusing to get married. It's all his fault as the eldest brother. Yi Li sighed in her heart. Her eldest brother was like that. Even if he was 40, he wouldn't lack girls who would rush to marry him, let alone 30. Madame Su was furious. Yi Li had to comfort her in a soft voice, saying, "Eldest aunt, don't be angry with my eldest brother. He's the most filial. If he knew that you were so sad, he would be sad too. No one can be sure about fate. Maybe he'll meet a girl tomorrow and chase after her to marry him." Although the possibility was almost zero. Yi Li couldn't imagine Su Qingchen chasing after a girl to please. "Eldest aunt, do you have any plans?" Yi Li knew that Madame Su wouldn't come here to complain to her. Madame Su nodded and said firmly, "I can't let him fool around anymore. Your second aunt plans to find a wife for Qing Feng. I've also found 2 girls for him. Think of a way for me to make him go back and meet those girls. He's so cunning. As soon as I mentioned it to him, he ran away. He's so busy today and so busy tomorrow. I don't go out often, so how can I catch him?" Yi Li was suddenly happy. So eldest aunt wanted to set up a blind date for her eldest brother but couldn't find anyone. Tilting her head and thinking, Yi Li nodded firmly and said, "Don't worry, eldest aunt. I'll let my eldest brother go back when the time comes." Madame Su was overjoyed. "Then I'll have to trouble you." Chapter 501. Yi Li said with a smile, "Eldest aunt, what trouble is there? Lear also wants to have a sister-in-law as soon as possible." As expected, Lady Su acted quickly. She was eager to marry a daughter-in-law. In less than 2 days, she brought a letter to Yi Li from the Su Fu, saying that everything was ready and waiting for Su Qingchen to return to find a daughter-in-law. Receiving Lady Su's sincere letter, Yi smiled helplessly and could only get up to go find Su Qingchen in the study. The front yard of the Prince Ding mansion had been divided into an office area by Yi. Other than the hall for receiving guests and the meeting room for meetings, there were also several study rooms of various sizes for the civil officials of the Prince Ding mansion to work. As soon as Yi stepped into the study, she saw Su Qingchen sitting behind the desk, leisurely sipping tea as he flipped through the booklets in his hands. She couldn't help but sigh in admiration at her older brother's elegance. The title of the greatest young master in the world did not come out of nowhere. Even though he was working tirelessly in the study dealing with the complicated political affairs, Su Qingchen looked elegant and otherworldly, as if he were a graceful young master reciting poetry. "Big brother." Yi stepped into the study and called out softly. Su Qingchen put down the booklets and got up with a smile. "Lear, why have you come to Big Brother's place at this time?" Yi waved her hand and smiled. "Big Brother doesn't need to be so courteous with Lear. Sit down and talk." Su Qingchen raised an eyebrow and slowly sat back down in his chair. He looked at Yi with a smile and waited for her to speak. Yi thought for a moment and asked, "How many days has it been since Big Brother returned to the Su Fu?" Su Qingchen was a quick-witted person. As soon as Yi spoke, he understood the purpose of Yi's visit. He smiled and asked, "Did Mother ask you to persuade me to go back to find a girl?" Yi couldn't help but feel embarrassed. There was nothing wrong with these words, but for some reason, it was especially awkward coming from Su Qingchen's mouth. Yi thought for a while and handed the letter from Madame Su to Su Qingchen. She smiled faintly and said, "Although Li shouldn't meddle in Big Brother's affairs, but Big Brother should at least give eldest aunt an explanation. Even if it can make her feel at ease, it's good. Big Brother, isn't it your habit to drag things out like this? You also made eldest aunt sad for no reason." Su Qingchen read Madame Su's letter, his handsome face tinged with helplessness and guilt. Yi looked at him and said softly, "No matter what reason or thoughts Big Brother has, it's better to tell eldest aunt clearly. Li, it seems like first aunt, first uncle, and grandfather aren't unreasonable people. If Big Brother really has any thoughts, the elders won't really force Big Brother to marry. Big Brother also doesn't have to hide from first aunt like now, right?" Su Qingchen was stunned, and he smiled bitterly and helplessly. Li saw through it. Yi pursed her lips and smiled. "Isn't it obvious? No matter how lazy Xiaoyao likes to be, he won't go so far as to push everything on Big Brother. He is still very clear about what's important and what's not. But Big Brother rarely returns to the Su estate recently, isn't that right?" Su Qingchen put away the letter and sighed softly. He looked at Yi and said, "Big Brother knows. He will return in a while." Yi blinked her eyes and looked at Su Qingchen with a smile. She asked, "Do you need Li to accompany Big Brother back to boost his courage?" Su Qingchen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After sending Su Qingchen off, Yi turned back to her study. When she entered, she saw Mo Xiaoyao leaning on the chair and reading a file with great interest. Hearing Yi's footsteps, Mo Xiaoyao hurriedly waved to her and said with a smile, "Li, quickly come and take a look." Yi curiously walked forward. "What are you looking at?" She lowered her head and saw that it was a file that the shadow guard had presented to her. It was Su Qingchen's life experiences. She lowered her head and glanced at Mo Xiaoyao. She raised her eyebrows and asked, "You had someone investigate Big Brother?" Mo Xiaoyao waved his hand and said, "I'm also helping Li. Aren't the Su family members worried about Su Qingchen's marriage? Li's thoughts have been heavy these past 2 days because she's been thinking about him, right?" Yi nodded and reluctantly accepted this explanation. She asked, "What are you reading?" Mo Xiaoyao raised his head and looked at Yi with some pity. Yi was startled. Could it be that something really happened to Big Brother? "Li, you have to hold on." Mo Xiaoyao patted Yi's hand and said comfortingly, "I think we really need to consider marrying your Big Brother off." "What do you mean?" Mo Xiaoyao waved the file in his hand and said, Everything that young Master Qingchen has done in the past 20 years is written here. But, there's never been any mention of what happened between him and that girl. There's not even the slightest mention of him being special to that girl. Yi Li narrowed her eyes and gritted her teeth. So you think Big Brother is gay? Mo Xiaoyao threw the file on the table and stretched elegantly. What else could it be? Young Master Qingchen will be 30 in 2 years. Would you believe it? In the past 30 years, young Master Qingchen hasn't even held a girl's hand. Yi Li tried to remain calm. You can say that Big Brother has high standards and doesn't like ordinary girls. Mo Xiaoyao looked up at the sky and rolled his eyes. It was obvious that he didn't believe Yi Li's self-comforting words. Yi Li pinched Mo Xiaoyao's perfect face and pulled it left and right. Don't always make Big Brother uncomfortable. If this kind of thing gets out, it won't be good for Big Brother. Mo Xiaoyao painfully pulled Yi Li's hands down and locked them in his palms. He rubbed his face where Yi Li was pulling and asked, "Does Li hate short sleeves?" Yi Li glared fiercely at him. "I don't hate it, but don't talk nonsense. Even if Big Brother is gay, he has to say it himself." Mo Xiaoyao nodded obediently. "So Li, you also agree that Su Qingchen is gay?" Yi Li completely forgot that although the Shadow Guard's report didn't say that Su Qingchen was special to any girl, it also didn't say that he was special to any man. She didn't know how Su Qingchen convinced Lady Su. After that, she didn't hear any rumors about the Su family's eldest son going on blind dates in Glass City. But Su Qingchen suddenly felt that every time his cousin looked at him, there was an indescribable strangeness and worry in her expression. If one were to ask what the most important event in the Northwest this year was, it would undoubtedly be the examination held in June. This was the first time in the 5 years since the Northwest became independent that it was holding an examination to select talents. Naturally, it attracted attention from all sides. At the same time, it once again expressed that the Northwest and Dechu State had nothing to do with each other. More importantly, the Northwest's examination this time wasn't limited to students in the Northwest. As long as the students from Dechu State and Xiling had real talent, the Northwest wouldn't reject them. Although the hot June wasn't a good time for the imperial examination, students from all over the Northwest, as well as some unrecognized talents from Dechu State and Xiling, had traveled thousands of miles to Glass City in an endless stream. Half a month later, the annual Glass City Chamber of Commerce would be held in Glass City. Merchants from all over the world would come from afar to bring their goods here to sell for a better price. Therefore, the people's enthusiasm for this city was as intense as the scorching summer. After 5 years, the current Glass City was no longer the same as it was in the past. Just the size of the city was at least twice as big as it was 5 years ago. The merchants on the streets and all kinds of dazzling goods were no worse than the Chu capital of Dechu State. From time to time, there would be people from the West who wore strange clothes, had very different hair colors, and had very different eyes from the people of the Northwest. Chapter 502. In Concentrated Fragrance Pavilion, Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li sat opposite each other in a room by the window. It was rare for them to be so relaxed as they drank tea and chatted. From time to time, they would look out the window and see the crowds on the streets. It was a scene of prosperity. Yi Li felt extremely gratified and satisfied when she saw this. This city was only as prosperous and peaceful as it was now because of their hard work over the past 5 years. Just like the Northwest, all of them had worked together to protect this land and the people of this land. Looking at the man sitting opposite her, Yi Li's heart was filled with tenderness and sweetness. They were not only husband and wife, but they also walked side by side and relied on each other. They had the same ideals and responsibilities. What is Li thinking about that makes you so happy? Mo Xiaoyao put down his teacup and looked tenderly at his wife, who was smiling warmly and contentedly. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "Nothing, I just feel that the scene in front of me makes me feel very happy." Following Yi Li's gaze, they saw a young couple setting up a stall to sell cosmetics on the streets. Although they were dressed plainly, their faces were filled with happy smiles. A family of 3 holding hands with their child walked down the street. The child pointed at a hawker selling tanghulu and asked for tanghulu. An old man in his 60s walked slowly through the crowd with steady steps. There were also many young scholars passing by. Everyone's face seemed to be blooming with a strange radiance and smile. Mo Xiaoyao turned his head and said in a gentle but firm voice, "As long as we are here, they will always live this happy life." Yili nodded and said softly, "Actually, the people don't want much. As long as they can live a peaceful life, eat well and wear warm clothes, they will be deeply grateful to you." Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, "Isn't that right? Isn't the person the people of the Northwest most revered the eyes Li? If it wasn't for Li, how could they live such a good life?" It was Li who proposed the plan to open up the Northwest to foreign trade. It was also Li's idea to reclaim land in the northern plains to grow food. Mo Xiaoyao's words were not false flattery. Li had done too much for the Northwest and the Mahist army. All this time, Mo Xiaoyao had been very glad that he had married such an amazing wife. Yili pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Prince is praising me. I'm just moving my mouth and writing. The ones who really need to do it are others." Mo Xiaoyao smiled, "Although there are many things that many people can do, no one has ever thought of it. Therefore, Mr. Li should still take the credit." "Prince, Princess, Yaoji requests an audience. Come in." Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said calmly. Yaoji pushed open the door and came in. 5 years had passed. The once #1 dancer of Chu had more mature charm and style. But after washing away her glamour, the present Yaoji was only wearing a plain dress and a jade hairpin. She had lost some of the pride of the #1 dancer and had more of a peaceful presence. Yili looked at the jasper lotus hairpin in Yaoji's hair. Her brows rose slightly and she said with a smile, "Long time no see, Yaoji seems to have become more beautiful." Yaoji smiled brightly and said, "Is Princess teasing me? How can I compare to Princess? You are the one who has become more elegant." Yili looked at her with a smile and said teasingly, "This jasper hairpin is very good. Ben Fei thinks it looks familiar." Yaoji couldn't help but uncomfortably touch the hairpin on her head and said, "This hairpin is very ordinary and the style is about the same." Yili shook her head and said with a smile, "That's not right. Don't look at how the jade hairpin is not of the highest quality. This jasper hairpin was passed down by the merchants of the western regions. There are only about 3 of them that can be found in the entire Li city. I kept a hibiscus hairpin and an orchid hairpin for the second madam of the Su family. The last hairpin was begged by someone else. So." Meeting Yi Li's teasing gaze, even Yaoji who had seen countless people couldn't help but blush. She hated the person who gave her the hairpin so much that her teeth itched. When that person gave her the hairpin, she naturally didn't want to accept it. But that person casually threw it away and said that he had no use for it and that he would throw it away if he didn't want it. She didn't think that this seemingly unremarkable hairpin had such a history. Yi Li saw that her face was getting redder and redder. She knew that she shouldn't tease her anymore. If she ruined her subordinate's marriage, she would be hated for the rest of her life. Using the words of her previous life, she would be kicked by a horse if she ruined her marriage. "All right, I won't tease you anymore." "What's the matter?" Yi Li asked with a serious expression. Yaoji saw that Yi Li was giving her a way out and was happy to change the topic. She quickly said, "The list of problematic students who came for the exam is here. Should we arrest them now?" Yaoji respectfully presented a list of names. She took it and looked at it before handing it to Yi Li. "It seems that Lei Zhenting and Mo Jingqi really think highly of us. They're taking advantage of every opportunity to send people to Li City. At least half of the people who came for the exam from Dechu State and Xiling are their people." Yi Li thought for a moment and said to Yaoji, "Don't worry about them for now. We'll talk about it after the exam. I also want to see what kind of outstanding talents Genom of Gojoseon and Mo Jingqi sent over. If a large number of nobles went missing before the exam, it would be easy to be discovered and cause a commotion. But after the exam, it would be different." Even if someone went missing, most of them would just take it as a failure and leave quietly. Yaoji agreed. She thought for a moment and said, "There's one more thing." Yaoji had already sent someone to report to Lord Mo Hua. "Since the prince and princess consort are here, I'll report to them first. I heard that the Chu capital is not very peaceful recently." The people in the restaurant downstairs heard this from the people who came from the Chu capital. Mo Xiaoyao frowned. "Did they say what happened?" Yaoji shook her head and said, "The other party is not a high-ranking official. They probably don't know much." Yili smiled. "It seems that our people in the Chu capital are not very useful." Mo Xiaoyao was not surprised and said indifferently, "Mo Jingqi's suspicions are so strong that it makes one's hair stand on end. In addition, he was fooled by Tan Jiji for nearly 10 years. Now, I'm afraid that he thinks of everyone as a traitor. Even if it means hurting himself, he will pull out all the people around him." Although the Prince Ding mansion still had some hidden pawns in the palace, they were hidden very deeply. Unless it was a matter of life and death for the Prince Ding mansion, they could not be easily used. It seems that everyone is tired of the peaceful days. Li, go back and choose a suitable person to go back to the capital to help Ling Haoyu. Mo Xiaoyao said with a cold smile. Yi Li nodded. Yaoji, who was standing at the door, gritted her teeth and suddenly said, "Prince, Princess Consort, if you can trust me, Yaoji is willing to go to the capital." "You?" Yi Li frowned, "But with your identity and the danger of going to the capital, have you really thought it through?" Yaoji nodded firmly. "Yaoji has thought it through. Although I have been in Glass City for the past few years, I have rarely shown my face. There are not many people in Glass City who can recognize me. In addition, Yaoji is no longer the Yaoji of the past. Not to mention other things, Yaoji still has the ability to protect myself." Yi Li looked at her determined appearance and sighed helplessly. "You still can't let it go?" Yaoji forced a smile and said, "Maybe I can let it go after going back this time. Yaoji will not delay the prince and princess consort's matter. I ask the prince and princess consort to agree." Chapter 503. Yi Li thought for a while and said, "You go back first. I'll think about it and give you a reply." Yaoji thanked her and went out, closing the door behind her. In fact, Yaoji is a good candidate. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li and said, "I'm afraid she still has feelings for Mu Yang." Yi Li frowned. "I don't believe that she has completely let go of Mu Yang, but I also don't believe that she will betray the Prince Ding mansion for Mu Yang. Her child is still in the northwest. She will never betray the Prince Ding mansion for the sake of her child. And, even if she has feelings for Mu Yang, I'm afraid she hates the people of Marquis Mu Yang's mansion." Yaoji has a clear distinction between love and hate. Mo Xiaoyao felt a little strange. Since Yi Li knows that she still has feelings for Qin Feng, why do you agree for her to be with Qin Feng? What do you mean I agree for her to be with Qin Feng? Yi Li squinted. "I just don't like to interfere with my subordinates' private lives. As long as it doesn't affect business, Qin Feng can like whoever he wants. Do I, as a princess, have to be a part-time matchmaker?" Mo Xiaoyao was also not interested in his subordinates' private affairs. "In that case, why don't you agree for Yaoji to go to the Chu capital?" Yi Li sighed and shook her head, asking, "Am I too soft-hearted?" Yi Li was no stranger to being a spy, so she naturally understood what a spy had to bear. After returning to the capital as Yaoji, the best way was to find a way to return to Mu Yang's side. In this way, whether Yaoji was killed by Mu Yang in the future, or when the two sides finally revealed their true intentions, Yaoji and Mu Yang were bound to stand on opposite sides of each other. It was too cruel for a man and a woman who once loved each other with a child, and it was also too cruel for Yaoji. "Yi Li is a kind-hearted woman," Mo Xiaoyao said softly. When Yi Li didn't notice, he quietly raised the corner of his mouth. Cruel to Mu Yang? He did not feel it in the least. He only remembered that Marquis Mu Yang played a part in Li Li's death when she fell off the cliff. He didn't release Mu Yang to let him go back to Marquis Mu Yang to enjoy the happiness of family. Although the main course couldn't be served yet, they could just order appetizers. As for Yaoji, she was the one who asked for it. Besides, the Prince Ding mansion had saved her life. Shouldn't she return the favor? In Yili's study in the Prince Ding mansion, Yili looked calmly at Qin Feng, who was standing in front of her, and asked, "What do you think about this?" Qin Feng's expression was calm. He lowered his eyes slightly and said, "Everything will be decided by Wang Fei." When he heard Yili say that Yaoji had asked to go to the Chu capital to assist Ling Haoyu, Qin Feng's face was blank for a moment. But soon, he restrained his emotions and calmed down. Seeing Qin Feng's expression, Yili understood that Qin Feng really cared about Yaoji. In the past few years, Qin Feng followed Yili for the sake of Qilin's commander. Yili's trust in him was no less than Zhuojing, Lin Han, and the others. Although she didn't like to interfere in her subordinates' private affairs, Yili didn't want her subordinates to be troubled by love and even affect their business. She looked at Qin Feng and said, "I haven't agreed to her request. If you don't want her to go, I can reject her request." Qin Feng was startled. He quickly shook his head and forced a smile. "This is her own decision. This subordinate has no right to interfere." Seeing him like this, Yili could only sigh softly and said, "Yaoji's trip will be very dangerous. I only hope that you won't regret it." Qin Feng was silent. "Thank you, Wang Fei." Yili didn't try to persuade him anymore. She took a booklet from the side and wrote a few words on it. She handed it to Qin Feng and said, "Since it's like this, send this to Yaoji. You can leave in 7 days." This subordinate obeys. After sending Yaoji off, Qin Feng didn't seem to be depressed. He still traveled between Qilin Station and Li City every day. It was just that he stayed in Qilin for a longer time. When the exam ended, Mo Xiaoyao and Yili personally selected a group of talented and capable young people to fill the ranks of the officials in the Northwest. Then came the annual Yi Li's grandest Chamber of Commerce. But this year, Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao didn't have time to participate in the grand event. They had to leave for Nanzhao to attend Princess Anqi's wedding. In the group heading to Nanzhao, other than Mo Xiaoyao, Yi Li, Qin Feng, and Zhuojing Feng, there was also Su Qingchen who had been shoved in at the last minute. The original plan was for Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao to go to Nanzhao and leave Su Qingchen and Su Hongyu to manage the Northwest affairs. But when they were about to leave, Su Hongyu drove Su Qingchen out and left behind General Lu Jingxian, who had originally been planning to go with them. No one knew what Mo Xiaoyao was thinking. He only thought for a moment before agreeing. And so, the group of people in the Northwest who were clearly above average in appearance leisurely went south to Nanzhao. In these years, Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li had been busy managing the Northwest and reorganizing the Mahist army. They hadn't stepped out of the Northwest in 5 years. But between the Northwest and Nanzhao was a large area of Dechu State's land. So when the group left the Northwest, they were watched by the soldiers of Dechu State. Although they didn't use force to intercept them, the feeling of being carefully and vigilantly watched wherever they went was still very unpleasant. One day, when the group passed by a small town to rest and eat, Mo Xiaoyao was finally annoyed by these people. This small town wasn't big. Even its name wasn't very eye-catching. But because it was close to the southwest border, a large number of soldiers were stationed there. It was considered the second or third line of defense in the southwest border and could directly support the southwest border. It was noon when Mo Xiaoyao and the group arrived at this small town. The weather was very hot. Seeing that they were only a little more than a day away from Shattered Snow Pass and there were still about 20 days until Princess Anqi's wedding, they weren't in a hurry to travel. They planned to rest in the small town for the night and continue their journey the next morning. The group wasn't picky people. There weren't any luxurious restaurants or inns in this small town, so they randomly chose a decent one and booked the entire room. The innkeeper saw that they were all handsome men and beautiful women, and their clothes were also not ordinary. He naturally understood that they were not ordinary people and was very attentive to them. There weren't many people in Yi Li's group. Other than Yi Li, Mo Xiaoyao, Su Qingchen, Feng San, and Qin Feng, Zhuojing, there were only about 40 guards. Half of them were Black Cloud Cavalry, and the other half were Qin Feng's subordinates, Qi Lin. There was no need to mention the Black Cloud Cavalry. Qi Lin's people were all kinds of people. Even things like making tea and cooking rice were a piece of cake for them. Not only the innkeeper and the waiters, but even the chef of the inn couldn't be used. Yi Li and the group sat on the second floor and ate the exquisite delicacies served by the Qi Lin's people who were proficient in cooking. She ordered the others to go eat as well. Qin Feng, you really have a lot of capable people under you. Feng Zhiyao praised as he ate the delicacies on the table that didn't lose to the taste of first-rate chefs. Qin Feng smiled faintly and said, "Young Master Feng San is overpraising me. It's just an insignificant skill." Feng Zhiyao was envious and jealous. It was indeed an insignificant skill. However, to be able to study these insignificant skills so thoroughly, they were definitely experts among experts. Feng Zhiyao had not only seen experts in cooking in Qilin, but there were also pedantic scholars who had nothing better to do. There were also talented people from all walks of life who were proficient in all kinds of crafts. There were even people who were tailors and embroideries. More importantly, these people also had terrifying strength. Chapter 504. Su Qingchen sipped his tea with a smile and listened to their conversation. Feng Zhiyao was a person who loved to see the world in chaos. He hated it when people stayed out of things. He immediately showed concern for young Master Qingchen. "Young Master Qingchen, you haven't liked to talk since we left the Northwest. Are you in a bad mood?" Everyone present immediately recalled Princess Anqi's affection for young Master Qingchen and the friendship between young Master Qingchen and Princess Anqi. Perhaps it wasn't that young Master Qingchen didn't like Princess Anqi, but that he was too reserved to say it. So now that Princess Anqi had married someone else, young Master Qingchen was sad. Everyone immediately imagined a series of unspeakable things about young Master Qingchen and Princess Anqi. They looked at Su Qingchen with sympathy. Su Qingchen's handsome face couldn't help but twitch. He sighed helplessly and said, "I'm just thinking, these people have been following us all the way, will something happen to them?" Everyone looked out the window. There were all kinds of people standing on the opposite side of the street, around the corner, and under the big trees. They seemed to be chatting idly, setting up a stall, or passing by occasionally, but such disguises were extremely clumsy in their eyes. Feng Zhiyao narrowed his eyes and said, "You don't say, there are more and more people following us. Do they really think we haven't noticed them?" Su Qingchen sighed and said, "It doesn't matter what they think. What I'm worried about is..." Mo Xiaoyao put down his wine cup and looked at Su Qingchen, saying, "You're worried that Mo Jingqi will kill us?" Su Qingchen's expression was solemn as he nodded his head. His brows furrowed slightly as he said, "Originally, the Northwest and Great Chu had coexisted peacefully these past few years. Mo Jingqi would not have acted against us if we had borrowed the passage to Nanzhao. But Mo Jingqi is an unstable factor. It's hard to guarantee that they won't do anything to us these days." Yi Li asked, "Big brother, if they really want to do something, where is the best place to do it?" Su Qingchen shook his head and said, "It depends on when they think it's convenient. We are now standing on Dechu State's soil. Mo Jingqi can say whatever he wants." Feng Zhiyao sneered, "Besides Xiling, there is only Dechu State that borders the Northwest. Do you want us to take a detour through Xiling?" Su Qingchen raised her eyebrows and said, "We may think this way, but it doesn't mean that Mo Jingqi will think the same way." Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly, "If that's the case, then let him try. Let I see how much Mo Jingqi has improved over the past few years." Feng Zhiyao scoffed. "How much can he improve? The area in the northeast had been ceded to the barbarian tribes there. The Great Dechu State can't even take care of a few tribes on the border. Instead, they are happily fighting with Mo Jingli in the Chu capital. Even though they no longer had anything to do with Dechu State, When they heard that a piece of land in the northeast of Dechu state had been taken over by a few tribes, it still made them feel uncomfortable. Especially the soldiers of the Mahist army. They found Mo Jingqi especially unpleasant. In the past, you thought that the Prince Ding mansion and the Mahist army were in your way. Now that the Mahist army and the Prince Ding mansion have nothing to do with you, why don't you work hard and show off your great talent? Since he hasn't improved, then I can help him fix the trash under his command. Mo Xiaoyao said faintly. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but exchange glances with each other. The prince's words seemed to have a bit of killing intent. However, was it really auspicious to kill someone on the way to their wedding? However, they didn't need to wait for Mo Xiaoyao to come find trouble. Because before they finished eating lunch, trouble had already come knocking on their door. Someone come. Immediately surround the inn. An arrogant male voice came from downstairs. Feng Zhiyao stood up and looked downstairs. He couldn't help but laugh. Yo, Prince, it's our old acquaintance. Mo Xiaoyao glanced downstairs and saw the person commanding the soldiers to surround the inn. He raised an eyebrow in confusion. He knew many people. The person in front of him didn't have much of an influence. He remembered what kind of old acquaintance he was. Feng Zhiyao smiled. Prince, look carefully at this person's face that makes people want to slap him. Also, look at that lame leg. Don't you think he looks familiar? When he said this, Mo Xiaoyao remembered. The one that was trampled by the horse? Why didn't the horse trample him to death? Feng Zhiyao smiled and said, should this subordinate find another horse to trample on? The people upstairs were still talking and laughing, but the people downstairs couldn't help but shout. They saw Guanren limping back and forth across the street. He shouted to the other side, a group of traitors dares to set foot on Dechu state's land. This general is under the orders of the emperor to eliminate the traitors. Why haven't you all surrendered yet? Upstairs, Feng Zhiyao couldn't help but grumble, if it was me, I would have shot 10,000 arrows at the inn and turned it into a hedgehog. He doesn't have much skill, but he talks a lot of nonsense. Qin Feng smiled and said, so young Master Feng San will live longer than him. Feng Zhiyao's face was full of smiles. He cupped his hands in thanks and said, thank you for your auspicious words. Qin Feng stood and looked disdainfully at the arrogant people downstairs. He tilted his head and asked, Prince, Wang Fei, should we kill him first? Mo Xiaoyao stood and said, no need. Let's go down and take a look first. That's right, find someone to take young Master Qing Chen away first. Even the weakest of them had the ability to protect themselves. Only Su Qingchen had no strength to truss up a chicken. If a fight broke out later, even though protecting Su Qingchen wouldn't be difficult, there were always accidents in the midst of chaos. Su Qingchen also knew that he was a burden. He nodded in agreement with Mo Xiaoyao's words. He only said to Yi Li, you must be careful. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, Big brother, don't worry. After sending off Su Qingchen, the group followed Mo Xiaoyao downstairs to watch the commotion. The guards who had been eating in the main hall downstairs had already stood and were guarding the door. On the street outside the door, there were a few corpses of Dechu state soldiers who didn't listen to warnings and wanted to charge into the inn first. Guan Rong clearly hadn't thought that the guards of the Prince Ding mansion would be so tough. They dared to kill people so easily even when surrounded by his soldiers. His already ugly face was now ashen. His expression was twisted to express his anger. You all have great guts. You still dare to be so arrogant when you're about to die. I will crush all of you to pieces to appease the hatred in my heart. Guan Rong, who was under the protection of many soldiers, shouted at the guards at the door. The guards at the door, especially Qi Lin's guards, couldn't help but twitch their mouths. They looked at Guan Rong like they were looking at an idiot and a dead person. This idiot didn't think that he would be safe if he hid behind people, so he was so arrogant, right? One of Qi Lin couldn't help but raise his hand and throw it at the person in front of him. With a swooshing sound, a green beam of light shot towards Guan Ren with great speed and accuracy. Guan Rong suddenly shot a green object at himself. Naturally, he jumped in fright and tried to dodge. But he was hiding in the middle of the soldiers and had grown fat over the years. How could he dodge? He didn't even have time to crouch down before the object arrived in front of him. He was so scared that he immediately shouted, "Hidden weapon! Hidden weapon! Save me! Save me!" Chapter 505. When that thing landed on his body, he felt a bone-piercing pain in his shoulder, but it wasn't enough to take his life. Everyone, including the Dechu state soldiers that Guan Ju had brought with him, couldn't help but look at the man who was shouting and yelling like he was an idiot. Someone muttered, "Idiot." Guan Ju realized something was wrong after yelling for a while. He opened his eyes and found that he was completely fine. He couldn't help but feel happy. Then he saw that his beautiful clothes were stained with something strange and wet. It had a faint fragrance. What is this?" Reporting to General, "It's a cucumber." The soldier beside him reported seriously. Only then did Guan Ju see a half-eaten cucumber on the ground not far away. He immediately realized that he had been tricked. He flew into a rage. "I'm going to kill you all. I'm going to kill you all. Go, kill these traitors." "Guan Ju, who do you want to kill? Why don't you tell I?" A cold and clear voice leisurely sounded from the inn. The guards immediately moved aside to make a path. Mo Xiaoyao's hair was still as white as snow. He appeared in front of everyone, holding Yi Li's hand in his white robes. "Guan Ju, who do you want to kill? Why don't you tell I?" When Guan Ju saw the white-haired Mo Xiaoyao walk out, he was shocked. But this time, he wasn't afraid of Mo Xiaoyao. In Guan Ju's heart, he was a loyal official of the Dechu state, the emperor's trusted aide. Mo Xiaoyao was just a traitor that everyone despised. More importantly, there were at least 3,000 elite soldiers inside and outside the small city, while Mo Xiaoyao only had a few dozen people. No matter how strong the Mahist army was, Guan Ju couldn't think of any reason why he would lose when he had such an advantage. So, after the initial shock, Guan Ren looked at Mo Xiaoyao with an arrogant and sinister expression again. That pair of eyes that appeared even smaller due to the excessive eating and eating over the past few years were filled with resentment and jealousy. That's right, it was jealousy. In this world, including the ruler of a country, Mo Jingqi, there were probably not many men who did not hate Mo Xiaoyao. He had the Prince Ding mansion and the Mahist army, two of the most tyrannical forces in the world. He had one of the best martial arts skills in the world, an outstanding handsome face, and a wife and adorable son that all ambitious men envied. There was no reason for the world not to be jealous of Mo Xiaoyao. However, Guan Ren's hatred for Mo Xiaoyao was far greater than anyone else's. When he was still following Mo Jingqi, who was still a young prince, the high-spirited and elegant little heir of Prince Ding was the object of his envy and jealousy. On the other side, at the foot of the mountain where the bandits were exterminated, Mo Xiaoyao, dressed in white, rode his horse over. Without saying a word, he ruthlessly whipped him. He made him lose face in front of thousands of soldiers. From that moment on, Guan Ren developed a hatred and jealousy towards Mo Xiaoyao from the bottom of his heart. He hated Mo Xiaoyao's background. If Mo Xiaoyao wasn't the heir of the Prince Ding mansion, how could he dare to whip him in front of so many people? If he wasn't Mo Lan Yun's descendant and Mo Lu Fang's son, how could he have such good talent? So, when he saw the Prince Ding mansion's misfortune, he was one of the happiest people. Ding! Mo Xiaoyao, a traitor like you still dares to set foot on Dechu State's land? Today, I will tear you to pieces to repay the emperor's kindness. Guan Ren pointed at Mo Xiaoyao and shouted righteously. Mo Xiaoyao casually glanced at Guan Ren and lightly said, Mo Jingqi is becoming less and less picky with the people he uses. Letting a cripple lead the troops outside, even if he isn't worried about you falling off your horse, he should be worried about the safety of the soldiers below. Feng Zhiao waved his fan and said with a smile, "Isn't that right?" With General Guan's crippled appearance, he definitely won't be able to walk onto the battlefield. If he falls off his horse and hits the soldiers beside him, what will happen? TSK, the emperor really doesn't know how to cherish his soldiers. You. Guan Ren was so angry he was panting. What he hated the most was other people mentioning his leg. He was a military general. If his leg was crippled, it was the end of everything. Even if he was a civil official, for the sake of the face of the court, he would not let a cripple enter the court as an official. That was why the emperor sent him out to lead the troops because of their past friendship. In fact, it was not his turn to lead the troops onto the battlefield. It was just an empty title. Although he had lived a good life these past few years, how could the southwest border compare to the prosperity of the Chu capital? And all of this was caused by the people of the Prince Ding mansion. Although Guan Ren did not know that his leg was broken by a horse because the Prince Ding mansion pushed Murong Shen to guard Shattering Snow Pass, he still wholeheartedly put the blame on the Prince Ding mansion. However, Guan Ren's reason was that he was Imo Jingqi's trusted aide, so Imo Xiaoyao deliberately wanted to get rid of him. "I will kill you all. I will kill you all. Shoot the arrows and kill these traitors." Guan Ren finally could not hold back his anger and roared. However, the soldiers under his command were not as obedient as he imagined. After all, the reputation of the Prince Ding mansion in the Dechu state had lasted for hundreds of years. It was an eternal legend in the army. It was not something that Imo Jingqi could completely destroy. If Imo Jingqi was given 20 or 30 years, he might be able to completely destroy the reputation of the Prince Ding mansion in the Dechu state. However, 5 years was too short. Moreover, when the Northwest announced its break with the Dechu state, the announcement was spread all over the country. The commoners and soldiers might not understand the principles, but they also understood that it was the imperial family that had wronged the Prince Ding mansion, not the other way around. The Prince Ding mansion had wronged the Dechu state. The hatred of killing one's father was irreconcilable. Prince Ding did not immediately lead the Mahist army to the capital to avenge his father and brother. In the eyes of the commoners, Prince Ding was magnanimous and still remembered the friendship of protecting the Dechu state for hundreds of years. At this moment, Guan Ren wanted the soldiers to immediately kill Imo Xiaoyao and his men. Even if the soldiers did not care about the reputation of the Prince Ding mansion, they still had to consider the mysterious Qilin of the Prince Ding mansion. Imo Xiaoyao glanced at the soldiers surrounding the inn with a faint smile. The soldiers who were still holding their bows and arrows hesitated, but after this faint glance, they could not help but put down their bows and arrows. Guan Ren saw that the soldiers did not listen to his orders and was so angry that his face turned black. He roared, "Impudent! Are you all going to rebel as well? Why aren't you executing these traitors?" The soldiers were naturally in a dilemma. They did not want to and were not willing to become enemies with the Prince Ding mansion, but Guan Ren was their superior. Even if this superior did not have the support of the people, they still had to listen to his orders. Feng Zhiao walked out of the crowd with a smile on his face. He smiled and said to the crowd, "Actually, there is no need for everyone to worry about the future. This problem is very easy to solve." The crowd was puzzled. They did not know how this elegant red-clothed young master was going to solve this problem. Feng Zhiao waved his sleeve and a long whip shot out from his sleeve, heading straight for Guan Ren. In the blink of an eye, Guan Ren had been tied up tightly by the whip and was pulled out of the crowd in front of Feng Zhiao. It was also Guan Ren's fault for not noticing people after he was attacked by the cucumber. There were too many of them and it was not convenient for him to dodge. Therefore, he had his men spread out a little. Otherwise, Feng Zhiao might not have been able to pull him out of the crowd. Chapter 506. Feng Zhiao lowered his head to look at Guan Ren, who had been tied up tightly by his whip. He used his fan to prop up his chin and smiled from ear to ear. "Isn't this settled? We'll take this Guan guy away. You just need to go back and report the truth. Don't worry, he won't be coming back. The soldiers hesitated for a moment, but in the end, they still opened up a path. Originally, Guanren had not obtained the approval of General Jing Bian, the commander stationed in the southwest. Instead, he had received Mo Jingqi's secret edict to act in secret. Therefore, if they went back and reported that Guanren had been taken away, General Jing Bian would not punish them. This way, they would not have to fight with the Prince Ding mansion. It was the best of both worlds. The soldiers felt satisfied, but Guanren did not feel the same way. Guanren naturally understood the meaning behind Feng Xiao's words. If he was really taken away by Prince Ding, his life would be over. You dare! When this general returns, I will definitely report this to the emperor and have all of your families executed. It would have been better if he hadn't said this. Once he finished speaking, the soldiers retreated even faster. The deputy at the very back even cupped his hands towards Feng Xiao and the others. This matter concerns the lives of several thousand of our soldiers. I ask that Prince take the trouble to deal with this. Mo Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes slightly and said indifferently, "Don't worry, I will not implicate you." The deputy was delighted. Many thanks to Prince. Seeing the Dechu state soldiers retreat, Feng Xiao held Guanren and turned around to ask, "Prince, should we leave this place first?" Several thousand soldiers had entered the city. Such an important matter could not be concealed. It was better for them to leave this place first. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, "If you've eaten, then let's leave." The group of people dragged Guanren, who had been turned into a dumpling, out of the city. While they were still at the inn, Guanren had been cursing non-stop. Feng Xiao found his cursing unbearable and casually picked up a rag from the table and stuffed it into his mouth. Guanke's eyes rolled back from the greasy cloth and she could only whimper. Less than 10 miles out of the city, Qin Feng, who was leading the way, suddenly stopped. The people behind him naturally stopped as well, vigilantly watching everything around them. Qin Feng sneered and said, "Come out. You can't even hide properly, yet you still want to follow others and launch a sneak attack." Before his voice died away, several sharp arrows whizzed towards Qin Feng. Qin Feng didn't even bother to get off the horse. He sat sideways on the horse's back and dodged the arrow. Many black-clothed and masked figures jumped out from the trees on the surrounding hillsides. Feng Xiao leaned against Zhuo Jing and muttered to himself. I knew that this trip to Nanzhao would not be so satisfying. But, is it really okay to wear black clothes and cover your face for half the day? In broad daylight, what color was more eye-catching than black? The corners of Zhuo Jing's mouth twitched. He distanced himself from Feng Xiao and said coolly, "Assassins usually like to wear black clothes and cover their faces." Nonsense. The Yanwang chamber has so many assassins. When have you ever seen them wear black clothes and cover their faces? Feng Xiao retorted. The Yanwang chamber was known as the #1 assassin organization in the world, but they never wore uniforms. This meant that uniform clothing was more harmful than beneficial to an assassin organization. Third-rate assassins, Zhuo Jing said calmly. Listening to Feng Xiao and Zhuo Jing's mocking and ridiculing each other, the atmosphere that should have been austere and tense became inexplicably funny. Although the expressions of the black-clothed assassins could not be seen because their faces were covered, their eyes that seemed to emit fire was enough to show their anger. Feng Xiao smiled and looked at the assassins across from him. He smiled carelessly and said, "Actually, other than third-rate assassins, there is another kind of person who must cover their faces in broad daylight." Yili asked with a smile, "What kind of person?" Feng Xiao smiled and said, "People who can't be seen. For example, imperial bodyguards." The assassins were silent, but they still couldn't hide the astonishment in their eyes. Mo Xiaoyao stepped forward and looked at the assassins surrounding him with his hands behind his back. He smiled coolly and said, "Imperial bodyguards? Mo Jingqi's actions are just to cover up his name. It's really unnecessary." Feng Xiao smiled and said, "Isn't that so? Our Prince Ding mansion has already cut off all ties with the Dechu state. If Mo Jingqi wants to kill our prince, he can just directly send people over. Isn't it good, just like what happened in the city? Why does he have to be so sneaky? However, Qin Feng said coldly, we will think that the Dechu state wants to provoke the Mahist army. The assassins hesitated. The leader pointed his blade at Mo Xiaoyao and said harshly, Prince Ding Yi, there's no need to say more. We are here on orders. If we can't bring back the prince and Wang Fei's heads, our own heads will fall to the ground. Sorry for the offense. With that, he waved his saber and everyone pounced on Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao's expression was indifferent. He casually flicked his sleeve and a strong wind blew two assassins to the side. Once Mo Xiaoyao moved, the others naturally would not stay idle. Instantly, the quiet road was filled with the sounds of fighting. The few assassins besieged Mo Xiaoyao but to no avail. With a thought, they turned their target to Yi Li, who was protected in Mo Xiaoyao's embrace with one hand. For assassins worked together to use all their strength to divert Mo Xiaoyao's attention. The other two assassins took the chance to point their swords at Yi Li. Yi Li was being protected by Mo Xiaoyao and could not move. Seeing that the two swords were about to hit Yi Li, the assassin holding the swords was overjoyed. But his body suddenly froze. He felt his chest light up. The Princess Ding who had been in Mo Xiaoyao's arms had disappeared. There was a cold dagger in his chest. A slender hand gripped the hilt of the dagger and pulled it out without hesitation. Instantly, blood spurted out. The assassin who slowly fell down looked with blurry eyes at the beautiful and gentle Ding Wang Fei, who was like the most elegant young lady in the Chu capital, holding a dagger that was stained with her own blood. She turned around to dodge another attack and like a light green wind, a thin red mark appeared on his companion's neck, killing two people in the blink of an eye. Yi Li casually flicked the fresh blood off her dagger and frowned. These few years, she had not trained enough and her movements were not as nimble. It seemed that even though she had learned Qinggong and Nigong in this life, she would not be able to return to her peak state in her previous life. However, Yi Li lifted her head to look at Mo Xiaoyao, who had cleared out most of the assassins nearby. Yi Li pursed her lips and smiled. This life was different. Even if she could not return to her peak state, it did not matter, right? After Mo Xiaoyao cleared out the assassins near him and Yi Li, he did not make any more moves. The guards around them also automatically separated the assassins from the prince and princess consort. Thus, Yi Li and Mo Xiaofeng became the most leisurely people present, except for the occasional one or two that slipped through the net. They are stalling for time. Yi Li looked at the assassins surrounding the guards and said with a frown. Mo Xiaoyao said lightly, they probably did not expect that Trash Guanjia would let us out of that small town. They do not have enough people right now, so they can only stall for time. If they wanted to deal with the guards of the Prince Ding mansion, especially when there was Qi Lin among them, it would be impossible to deal with them without at least 3 to 5 times the number of people. The 100 or so people in front of them were not even enough to make them grind their teeth. Yi Li lifted her head to look at him and said, "You want to?" Chapter 507. Mo Xiaoyao sneered, "Wait. If we don't teach Mo Jingqi a lesson, he won't know what it means to stop. Even though we're not afraid of him, mosquitoes and flies can be a nuisance." Hearing Mo Xiaoyao's words, Yi Li didn't say anything more. She leaned against the horse next to her and observed the fight. The horses of the Prince Ding mansion were all excellent war horses. Even though they were fighting on the official road, the horses only ran to the grass on the side of the road and quietly grazed on the grass. They didn't seem frightened at all. Some of the horses even stood on the official road and took the opportunity to trample on the black-clothed assassins who had been knocked to the ground. Even though the assassins tried their best to stall for time, it only took a little more than a quarter of an hour before the group of assassins were all lying flat on the ground. The bodyguards who followed Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li to the south had already had enough of being watched from the shadows no matter where they went. It wasn't easy for them to get some exercise, so naturally they couldn't hold back. When they stopped, they still complained that their opponents were too weak. Mo Xiaoyao naturally couldn't really stop and wait for the other party to come knocking on his door. The group could only continue on their way. As for the corpses on the official road, no one paid any attention to them. After all, commoners didn't walk on the official road, so they didn't have to worry about scaring people. The group knew that they were nearing Shattered Snow Pass by the next day, but they still didn't see anyone chasing after them. If it was Mo Jingqi's men, they wouldn't be so slow. Mo Xiaoyao frowned and waved his hand, ordering, "You guys go back and tie up all the deputy generals along the way." Several Qilin men heard the order and immediately went forward to ask, "Prince, should we kill them?" Mo Xiaoyao said calmly, "Tie them up if you can, kill them if you can't." This subordinate obeys. How could they, the Qilin, not have a mission that they couldn't complete? Immediately, the group decided that they had to kidnap all of the deputy generals of the 11 Dechu state cities that were seriously ill and bring them back to the northwest. Although it was a bit of a pity, why didn't the prince give the order to kidnap the general? The position of deputy general did not sound too difficult. Hearing this, Feng Zhiao asked curiously, "Prince, didn't they stop chasing us?" Looks like he's quite tactful. Mo Jingqi definitely wouldn't just send a group of people to assassinate them, and they didn't hide their tracks along the way. The only explanation was that the generals guarding the city had no intention of chasing after them. The corners of Mo Xiaoyao's lips curled up slightly as he said coldly, "There's a price to pay for making I wait for nothing." Feng Zhiao couldn't help but shiver. In the end, it was Mo Jingqi who had provoked the prince, right? Thinking about Mo Jingqi's expression when the news of all the deputy generals suddenly being kidnapped and disappearing reached the Chu capital, Feng Zhiao was secretly amused. If they could kidnap the deputy generals, they could naturally kidnap the general. He believed that their journey back from Nanzhao would be much smoother and cleaner. "Prince, Shattered Snow Pass is up ahead. Do you think General Murong would?" Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, "General Murong is a righteous and upright person. Mo Jingqi would never give him such an order. Even if Mo Jingqi's people were at Shattered Snow Pass, it wouldn't be easy to move troops without permission." Feng Zhiao nodded, "That's true." Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and said to Yi Li, "How about we rest for a day in Yonglin and come out the day after tomorrow?" Yi Li nodded and said, "You can decide. Big Brother should also be waiting for us in Yonglin." Looking at the city that was already in sight, Yi Li couldn't help but sigh in her heart. In the blink of an eye, 5 or 6 years had already passed. 6 years ago, she was still doing her best to protect this small city. But now, this place already seemed to have nothing to do with them. Sure enough, Su Qingchen was waiting for them in Yonglin. When everyone arrived at the small city of Yonglin, young Master Qingchen was sitting leisurely in the best tea house in Yonglin City, drinking tea. Seeing them come in, Su Qingchen smiled and said, "I've been waiting for you for a long time. I've already booked an inn. How about we rest for a day in Yonglin before coming out?" Yi Li smiled and said, "Big Brother is very thoughtful. Xiaoyao and I also have the same plan." Everyone took a seat. Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "It seems that everyone didn't have enough fun on the way." Hearing this, Feng Zhiao was immediately filled with resentment and complained, "Isn't that so? Young Master Qingchen, you don't know. We've been walking and waiting all this time. In the end, we've already passed the Cloud Mist River, but those cowards still haven't caught up with us. You made me look forward to it. These past few years had been too peaceful. In the northwest, there were even people fighting to suppress bandits. So much so that there weren't even any bandits in the northwest now. Really, his hands were itching. Mo Jingqi is really boring. If he gives the order to kill us, he'll definitely kill us. If he gave an order, how would those generals dare to disobey? I also want to experience the feeling of being surrounded by thousands of soldiers. Look at now, the people below are cutting corners. If Mo Jingqi knew that we left Shattered Snow Pass without losing a single soldier, I wonder if he would die of anger." Su Qingchen shook his head and said with a smile, "Feng San, you're thinking too much. Mo Jingqi can't possibly make an announcement. Once it's announced to the world, it's tantamount to officially declaring war on the Mahist army. I'm afraid that before he can kill us, the Mahist army will march to Feihong Pass. If they can really kill the prince with all they have, then it's fine. But if the prince comes to the northwest... The anger of Prince Ding and the nearly 1 million Mahist army wasn't something that just anyone could bear. After listening to Su Qingchen's analysis, Feng San could only express regret for Mo Jingqi's cowardice. Reporting to Prince, downstairs, an envoy from the Chu state requests an audience. An imperial bodyguard came up to report. An envoy from the Chu state. Feng Zhiyao was somewhat astonished. He looked at Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li and asked, in this kind of situation, an envoy from the Chu state can still request an audience with the prince? Su Qingchen smiled indifferently and said, Feng San, why don't you guess who the envoy from the Chu state is? Feng Zhiyao looked at him and said, could it be that young Master Qingchen has already met him? Su Qingchen shook his head and said, I haven't, but I can make a few guesses. Nanzhao has sent a letter of credence to invite the rulers and dignitaries of various countries to attend Princess Anqi's wedding. The Chu state can't send an envoy that's too low in rank, but, with Mo Jingqi's personality, he won't come in person. Mo Jingqi was someone who valued his status the most and was also very vigilant about his own safety. Mo Jingqi hadn't even been 100 li away from the capital, much less come to Nanzhao, which was thousands of li away. Usually, unless it was absolutely necessary, he would stay within the heavily guarded palace and would never take half a step out of the palace. Mo Jingqi already knew that Prince Li has some connections with Nanjiang. This time, he won't let Prince Li get ahead of him. In the entire capital, Mo Jingqi can only trust the Lu family. Su Qingchen smiled faintly, but there was a hint of coldness in his smile. When Mo Jingqi suddenly decided to make an example of the Su family, the Lu family must have instigated it. Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said, Lu Chunfeng. Feng Zhiyao blinked and asked, who is Lu Chunfeng? Zhua Jing laughed softly and said, young Master Feng, Lu Chunfeng is Prime Minister Lu, noble consort Lu's father. It was no wonder that Feng Zhiyao didn't know. Although noble consort Lu was about the same age as Mo Xiaoyao and the others, Lu Chunfeng himself was only 2 years younger than Duke of Hua. In Feng Zhiyao's memory, he was Prime Minister Lu by the time he noticed this person. Naturally, he didn't remember his name. Chapter 508. Su Qingchen nodded and said, that's right. I guess the messenger from the Chu state is Lu Chunfeng. Yi Li frowned slightly and looked at Mo Xiaoyao, who was next to her. Does Prince Lu have a relationship with Prime Minister Lu? Mo Xiaoyao sneered and said, the Prince Ding mansion and the Lu family have always been at odds. How can they be friends? When Mo Lufang was still young, the Lu family was not led by Prime Minister Lu, but by Old Master Lu, who had passed away. Old Master Lu became the Prime Minister when he was over 60 years old. However, Prince Regent Mo Lufang, who was only in his 20s, was above him. How could Old Master Lu, who was narrow-minded, tolerate that? During those years, Old Master Lu had always made things difficult for Mo Lufang. Therefore, the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and the Lu family had never been good. That was why noble consort Lu was infatuated with Mo Xiaoyao back then. Not only did Mo Xiaoyao have no interest in her, but even the Lu family did not agree to the marriage. Instead, they sent her to the palace without hesitation. Let him in. I also want to see why he wants to see Mo Xiaoyao ordered calmly. Not long after, the man was led into the tea house. As expected, it was Prime Minister Lu, who had white hair and a beard. Although Lu Chunfeng was old, his body and spirit seemed to be in good condition. His pair of cloudy eyes were shining with shrewdness. However, the people standing next to him stunned everyone. There were 2 women standing next to Prime Minister Lu. The older one was wearing a snow-white robe. Her beautiful face looked cold. Who else could it be other than noble consort Lu? Although noble consort Lu was over 30 years old, time seemed to be extra kind to her. She did not look much different from 5 or 6 years ago. Standing next to noble consort Lu was a 13 or 14-year-old girl. She was wearing a light yellow robe embroidered with pink and white hibiscus flowers. Her face, which had gradually grown up, was already showing a faint trace of beauty. It could be imagined that in 2 years, the young girl's appearance would definitely not be inferior to noble consort Lu's. Her clear and bright eyes revealed a purity and elegance that noble consort Lu would never have. Seeing Yi Li, the girl's face lit up. She couldn't help but take a step forward and call out softly, "Princess Ding." Yi Li was slightly startled. Looking at the countenance that bore some resemblance to Empress Hua and Hua Tianxiang, her heart stirred as she said, "Princess Chengel." Seeing that Yi Li remembered her, Princess Chengel nodded her head in delight. She lifted her foot, intending to walk towards Yi Li. Behind her, noble consort Lu lightly coughed, indifferently saying, "Princess, as the princess of a country, you should pay attention to etiquette. Do not lose your decorum and shame the emperor." Halting her steps, Princess Chengel turned her head to look at noble consort Lu. Beaming, she replied, "Many thanks to noble consort for the reminder." However, it was not this princess who wanted to come up. Rather, it was noble consort who suggested it. This princess only wishes to reminisce about the past with Princess Ding. "I wonder who your highness wishes to reminisce with?" Noble consort Lu's complexion changed as she stared fixedly at Princess Chengel. Princess Chengel was not afraid, unhesitatingly returning her gaze. After a while, noble consort Lu replied, "I naturally wish to reminisce with Princess Ding." Yi Li stood up. Smiling faintly, she said, "It is rare to meet an old friend in this border town. Since both noble consort and the princess wish to reminisce with this consort, why don't we change locations? This will also prevent noble consort's reputation from being ruined." Princess Chengel cheerfully took Yi Li's hand. Smiling, she said, "Princess Ding, long time no see. I thought we would never see each other again. Let's go somewhere else to talk." Finished speaking, Princess Chengel pulled Yi Li towards a side room. The entire upper floor of the tea house had been reserved by Su Qingchen. There was no need to worry that Princess Chengel would casually walk into someone else's room. After taking 2 steps with Yi Li, Princess Chengel turned her head to look at noble consort Lu, who was still standing in her original position. Narrowing her watery eyes, she smiled and said, "Noble consort Lu, you are still not leaving? Even if this princess's reputation is somewhat lacking, it does not matter. The emperor's daughter does not have to worry about marriage. However, if noble consort Lu, I wonder if imperial father would like to hear someone say that a pear blossom is unfaithful? What nonsense are you speaking?" Noble consort Lu's face reddened. Glancing at the purple-clothed, silver-haired man with his back to her, she quickly followed. Behind her, Feng Xiao finally recovered his wits. Pointing in the direction that Princess Chengel had disappeared, he clicked his tongue and said, "That girl is Princess Chengel?" Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyes and glanced at him, indifferently lowering his gaze to drink his tea. "Do you have any objections?" Feng Xiao was embarrassed and speechless. What objections could he have? Although he had only met Princess Chengel once or twice, he still remembered the innocent and adorable appearance of the little princess, who had been doted on and protected by older sister Hua. Previously, he had even been jealous of this little princess, because she had received all of that person's love and care. However, was this the so-called "a girl changes 18 times between childhood and womanhood"? That innocent and adorable little princess could actually casually spit out such bitter mockery. Su Qingchen lowered her eyes, indifferently saying, "Princess Chengel's days in the palace are not easy." Feng Xiao remained silent, his expression gradually sinking. Ever since the empress had pleaded for leniency for the Su family several years ago, she had been stripped of her right to control the harem by the emperor. Although everything else remained the same, with the empress's connections and prestige in the palace, no one dared to be disrespectful to her. However, an empress who wielded real power was different from an empress who was merely a figurehead. Standing to the side, Prime Minister Lu's complexion alternated between green and white. These people had absolutely no intention of inviting him to sit. They even discussed in front of him how his daughter, who was in charge of the imperial harem, had treated Princess Changel harshly. Prime Minister Lu was so angry that his beard stood up. He could not help but interrupt. Third young Master Feng's words are too serious. Has my daughter ever mistreated Princess Changel? Feng Xiao, Zhuo Jing, and Lin Han, who had been engaged in a heated discussion, immediately quieted down. Zhuo Jing's expression changed, returning to its usual indifference. Tilting his head, he glanced at Prime Minister Lu and said, "Prime Minister Lu, don't you know manners to disturb others' conversation?" Prime Minister Lu was so angry that he fell backwards. Pointing at Zhuo Jing, he stammered for a long time, unable to say anything. After a long time, he finally calmed down. Fuming, he said, leaving a guest to the side, "Is this how the Prince Ding mansion treats its guests? Those who are welcomed are guests. Those who come uninvited." Lin Han looked at Prime Minister Lu sincerely, using his expression to tell him that they had not invited him upstairs. Feng Xiao supported his chin with one hand, casually saying, "Furthermore, Prime Minister Lu, this young master not only suspects that the Lu family does not follow the rules, but that the entire imperial family of the Dechu state does not follow the rules, right? Just now, when we came upstairs, how did you walk?" Prime Minister Lu walked in front, with Princess Changel at the back. "What's the problem?" Prime Minister Lu unhappily asked. Feng Xiao sneered and said, "Prime Minister Lu, noble consort Lu is a standard first-rank official. Princess Changel is also a standard first-rank official. As for you, the Prime Minister, you are a standard first-rank official. However, isn't there a difference between different first-rank officials? No matter how high noble consort Lu's rank is, she is still a concubine. Princess Changel is the Empress's legitimate daughter. Let me ask you, would your family allow a concubine to walk in front of a daughter of the first wife? Moreover, you are a concubine's father." Feng Xiao. You. Prime Minister Lu was so angry that his entire body began to tremble. The finger he used to point at Feng Xiao trembled incessantly. He could not say that Feng Xiao was wrong. Under normal circumstances, as the Prime Minister, he was required to salute Princess Changel when he saw her. As for the situation between noble consort Lu and Princess Changel, he could not say that the rules of the imperial family were different from those of ordinary families. Although in the palace, Princess Changel had to perform the etiquette of a junior to noble consort Lu, in the eyes of the scholars of the realm, Princess Changel, as the eldest princess of the first wife, was more honorable than noble consort Lu. The eldest daughter of the first wife saluted noble consort Lu out of respect and courtesy for her imperial father. It was not necessary. Chapter 509. Prince Ding, is this how you discipline your subordinates? Prime Minister Lu was so angry that he did not choose his words carefully, directly pointing the spearhead at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao tilted his head, his sword-like eyebrows slightly raised. The corners of his lips hooked up in a cold smile. How I discipline my subordinates is none of your business. Prime Minister Lu finally understood that he could not gain the slightest advantage in front of the people of the Prince Ding mansion. Not to mention Feng Xiao, Zhuo Jing, and the others, there was also Su Qingchen, who had not spoken at all. Su Qingchen was a formidable figure who, at the age of 17, had caused the eminent monks of the present age to vomit blood. As a result, Prime Minister Lu's eyes rolled back, and he directly collapsed. Feng Xiao blinked his eyes. That's it? Recently, they had encountered Mo Jingqi's men. Regardless of whether it was civil or martial, why were their combat prowess so weak? Su Qingchen smiled faintly. It's not that it's impossible. This is the best way to withdraw. This showed that Prime Minister Lu knew when to yield and when to stand tall. If he continued to persist, it was likely that he would faint from Feng Xiao and the others' provocations. In the end, Su Qingchen could not allow an old man in his 70s or 80s to lie on the ground all alone. He indicated to the imperial bodyguard standing at the foot of the stairs to have Prime Minister Lu's attendants bring him down to see a physician. In the other side of the room, the atmosphere was completely different from outside. Princess Changel tugged at Yili and chattered incessantly. Her somewhat tender and beautiful face had a bit of innocence and sincerity. Yili smiled as she looked at Princess Changel, her eyes filled with warmth. After not seeing each other for several years, the once lowly girl had already grown into a slender and elegant young lady. Only noble consort Lu sat a bit further from the two. Her expression was indifferent and somewhat absent-minded. Clearly, she had no intention of reminiscing about old times with Yili. Noble consort Lu did not pay attention to Yili. Yili also did not intend to pay attention to noble consort Lu. Originally, when they first met several years ago, Yili had a somewhat favorable impression of noble consort Lu. After all, it was not easy to have such a unique woman in the palace. However, after seeing noble consort Lu's infatuation with Mo Xiaoyao and how she targeted her both openly and secretly, Yili's good impression of her had completely disappeared. After all, no matter how much noble consort Lu loved Mo Xiaoyao, Yili was Mo Xiaoyao's legal wife. She had no problem with noble consort Lu liking Mo Xiaoyao, but it was a bit too much for her to be so fond of his first wife that she disliked her. Especially when Yili saw noble consort Lu's cold and noble appearance, she easily thought of how she begged Mo Xiaoyao in the peach forest in the imperial palace. She couldn't help but feel upset. "Princess Ding, I heard that you gave birth to an adorable little brother." Pulling on Yili's arm, Princess Changel asked curiously. Yili smiled and nodded. "That's right. He's already 5 years old." Sighing, Princess Changel said, "The little brother born to Princess Ding and Prince Ding's uncle is definitely adorable and intelligent. Why did Princess Consort not bring him to the southern border?" Yili looked at Princess Changel's regretful expression. Yili could not help but laugh. Raising her hand, she tapped Princess Changel's nose and laughed. "There are so many little brothers in the palace. Has Princess not seen enough?" Princess Changel lightly snorted, her small lips curling as she replied, "Imperial mother did not give me a little brother. Changel does not have a little brother." Good, good, good. You don't have a little brother. Then in the future, our Xiaobao will call you Big Sister Princess, okay?" Yili could not help but laugh. Princess Changel's eyes brightened. Blinking her eyes, she smiled and said, "Really? Then, should I give my little brother a greeting gift?" I cannot go to the northwest right now. Princess Consort, help me bring it back to my little brother. In the future, when my little brother sees Changel, he will like me." As she spoke, she lowered her head to look at herself. Without the slightest hesitation, she pulled off an exquisite jade bell from her wrist and stuffed it into Yili's bosom. Somewhat astonished, Yili held the jade bell. It was exquisitely carved from the highest quality white jade and had an auspicious design of a dragon and a phoenix. The dragon and phoenix intertwined to form a small ball. Between the hollow dragon and phoenix, one could see a round jade bead wrapped within. Although it was only a small and exquisite bell, the incomparably exquisite craftsmanship and the highest quality jade made it obvious at a glance that it was extremely valuable. With Princess Changel being so generous, even noble consort Lu could not help but glance at her. Frowning, she stated, "Princess, this jade bell was bestowed to you by the Empress Dowager." Princess Changel's face sank in displeasure. She replied, "Since Imperial Grandmother bestowed it to I, it is I's. What does it have to do with noble consort Lu who I wish to give it to?" Yili reached out to hold Princess Changel. Smiling, she replied, "All right. I thank Princess for your gift on behalf of Chen Er. Speaking of which, I should also give Princess a gift on behalf of Chen Er. However, I really don't have anything on me that I can take out." Princess Changel's eyes brightened. Blinking her eyes, she looked at Yili and asked, "Princess, can't you choose your own gift?" Raising her brows, Yili asked with a smile, "What does Princess want?" Rising, Princess Changle leaned over to Yili and whispered a few words into her ear. Yili frowned slightly. Somewhat puzzled, she asked, "What do you want it for?" Pursing her lips, Princess Changle tugged at the small braids in front of her chest. Smiling, she replied, "For fun, of course. No one else is willing to give it to me. I know that Princess definitely has it. I just want one. Is that okay, Princess?" Thinking it over, Yili replied, "I'll go back and look for it. If I have it, I'll give it to you." Princess Changle's eyes curved into crescents as she smiled. "I just knew that Princess Ding is the best." Yili raised her hand and stroked Princess Changle's hair. Softly, she asked, "That's right. Why did your imperial father send you to attend Princess Anshi's wedding?" Hearing these words, Princess Changle's originally clear eyes dimmed slightly. That night, after returning to her room, Yili was still frowning as she pondered the matter of Princess Changle. Although in Yili's eyes, Princess Changle was still a child, in reality, she had already grown up. Although Princess Changle would occasionally provoke noble consort Lu, she understood what could and could not be said. As a result, she could only casually find an excuse for Yili's question. Yili also understood that although Princess Changle was a princess, she did not have freedom. As such, she did not force her. "What is Princess Li thinking about?" Mo Xiaoyao asked softly as he supported Yili's shoulders from behind. Yili turned her head to glance at him. Smiling faintly, she replied, "It's nothing. I'm thinking about Princess Changle's wedding. For the Grand Duchy state to allow a noble consort and a princess to personally attend the wedding of a princess of Nanzhao was truly unreasonable. Of course, noble consort Lu's attendance was even more unreasonable than Princess Changle's. However, Yili was more concerned about Princess Changle. Naturally, she did not have any thoughts about noble consort Lu. Mo Xiaoyao sat down by Yili's side. As he poured a cup of tea for each of them, he asked, "What's wrong with Changle?" Yili replied, "Don't you feel that it's strange that Imo Jingqi did not personally attend Princess Anshi's wedding? Instead, he sent a noble consort and a princess. It was reasonable for a princess to be sent as an envoy to another country. However, sending a noble consort alone to another country was extremely strange." Mo Xiaoyao placed his teacup on the table. Raising his eyes to look at Yili, he said, "Mo Jingqi most likely wants a political marriage." "A political marriage?" Yili stared blankly, unable to react. "A political marriage? Who is it?" Mo Xiaoyao calmly looked at her, not replying. Yili quickly reacted. Frowning, she asked, "Are you talking about Princess Changle?" However, Nanzhao does not have a prince, nor does it have any worthy nobles. Why would the eldest princess of Dechu state need a political marriage? Chapter 510. The king of Nanzhao had no sons. He did not even have any living brothers or nephews. As a result, Princess Anshi had become the crown princess, the next queen of Nanzhao. As a result, who did the princess wish to marry into? Mo Xiaoyao indifferently stated, "Although Nanzhao has no princes, there is still the king of Nanzhao." "You mean?" Yili was speechless. She finally understood why Princess Changle's expression had been so gloomy upon hearing her question. Although she had not met the king of Nanzhao, Princess Anshi was already 25 or 26 years old. It seemed that the king of Nanzhao had only had Princess Anshi around the age of 20. In other words, the king of Nanzhao was nearing the age of birth. If this was truly the case, then compared to Princess Changle, Princess Ronghua, who had married the crown prince of the northern tribes, could be considered fortunate. There was another point. If the two countries truly wished to marry into Nanzhao, they should first submit a letter of credence. After the nobles and courtiers of the two countries discussed the wedding, the other side would send someone to escort the bride. This would be a formal marriage. Now that they had sent someone to escort Princess Changle to Nanzhao, it was clear that they were gifting Princess Changle to the king of Nanzhao. As a result, even if they were truly married in the future, the respect that the people of Nanzhao would have for Princess Changle would be very limited. What was Mo Jingqi thinking? Mo Jingli secretly has connections with the Holy Maiden of Nanjiang and several tribes there. Because of her relationship with young Master Qingchen, Princess Anqi has always been on good terms with us. Now that the Dechu state is suffering from internal and external troubles, Mo Jingqi probably wishes to form an alliance with the king of Nanzhao, Mo Xiaoyao calmly stated. Alliance? Yi Li raised her eyebrows. With a smile on his face, Mo Xiaoyao pulled her into his embrace. Resting his chin on her head, he indifferently stated, "This generation's king of Nanzhao has great ambition but little talent." Back then, he rashly entered the palace and the Dechu state was beaten back by Ai, nearly destroying it. On the contrary, Princess Anqi had shown great political talent since she was a child. She was able to help the king of Nanzhao govern Nanzhao at the age of 14. If it weren't for Princess Anqi, Nanzhao wouldn't have been able to recover so quickly after the war. Then there was the Saintess of the Southern Wilderness. Although she didn't have much talent in politics, her scheming methods and the people behind her were all pretty good. Back then, Nanzhao King used the Saintess of Nanjiang to suppress Princess Anqi. In recent years, I heard that the fight between Princess Anqi and the Saintess of Nanjiang has become more and more intense. Nanzhao King is probably having a hard time being stuck in the middle. Yi Li understood. It turned out that this was a power struggle between an incompetent father and two powerful daughters. Yi Li nodded and said, "I understand. After all, the king of Nanzhao is the king of Nanzhao. Even if he doesn't have much ability, as long as he sits on the throne, he can compete with Princess Anqi and Xu Manlin." Because Princess Anqi and Xu Manlin had someone backing them, the king of Nanzhao also planned to form an alliance with Mo Jingqi of the Dechu state. Speaking of which, Xu Manlin should have retired from the position of saintess and retired to that southern border Holy Land, right? Mo Xiaoyao indifferently replied, "Rules are set by people. Naturally, there were ways to break them." At the very least, Xu Manlin was still comfortably sitting in the position of Saintess of Nanjiang. Furthermore, she had more freedom and authority than before. Yi Li helplessly sighed. In the end, this was a power struggle between Mo Jingqi and the king of Nanzhao. The only victim was the innocent Princess Changle. Mo Xiaoyao reached out and wrapped his arms around Yi Li, pulling her into his embrace. A hand gently patted her hand, whispering, "Has Princess Li's heart softened?" Yi Li sighed and replied, "Princess Changle is still a child." Mo Xiaoyao replied, "There are no children in the imperial family. She knows what she needs to do." Yi Li wrinkled her brows. Turning to look at him, she stated, "Princess Changle asked me for a dagger." Mo Xiaoyao thought for a moment before replying, "Give it to her." Yi Li nodded her head, once again leaning into Mo Xiaoyao's embrace. She was unable to save Princess Changle. If it was only Princess Changle, she would have simply had someone take her away and hide her away. However, behind Princess Changle was the Hua family, the imperial family of the Dechu state, the empress, and countless other people's fates were not things she could control. Therefore, since she was unable to save Princess Changle, then, she would give her what she wanted. "Xiaoyao, in the future, I don't want Bao Bao to marry someone else." Leaning into Mo Xiaoyao's embrace, Yi Li softly stated. Mo Xiaoyao gently stroked her hair, his eyes filled with a faint warmth. "Our son does not need to rely on marriage for anything." Hearing these words, Yi Li could not help but smile comfortably. That's right, their son did not need to sell out his marriage for any benefits. At this moment, Yi Li was incomparably grateful to Mo Jingqi for introducing her to Mo Xiaoyao. Not only for herself, but also for her child. "Xiaoyao, I have never said that meeting you was the happiest thing in my life." Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head to look into her clear and beautiful eyes, within which were blazing emotions. Lowering his head, he kissed her fragrant lips, gently rubbing them together. "No. In the future, you will say it every day. The next day, not only did Mo Xiaoyao's group not leave Yonglin, but Prime Minister Lu's group also did not leave. Once again, they met at the best restaurant in the city. Yi Li could not help but raise her elegant brows. Her gaze swept over noble consort Lu, who was standing beside Princess Chang'e. Holding Mo Xiaoyao's arm with one hand, she smiled faintly and asked, "Noble consort and princess are also out shopping? How come I don't see Prime Minister Lu accompanying you?" Noble consort Lu silently looked at the two people standing side by side. Yi Li naturally held on to Mo Xiaoyao's arm. Mo Xiaoyao clearly did not have any expression of rejection. Lowering his head to look at Yi Li, his gaze contained a warmth that he had never shown when looking at others. Noble consort Lu's eyes darkened. She indifferently stated, "My father is unwell." "Thank you for your concern, Miss Yi." Yesterday, Yi Li had naturally heard of Prime Minister Lu's fainting on the spot. In the Prince Ding mansion, apart from Feng Zhiyao, Zhuo Jing was the one who was most adept at pressuring others. Feng Zhiyao had grown up in the light. His expression was one of contempt. Although Zhuo Jing had developed a poker face when he was a shadow guard, his heart was not poker face at all. Not to mention that he held a grudge, his poisonous tongue from time to time could easily strike a blow to others. Prime Minister Lu had provoked these two people at the same time. Furthermore, Mo Xiaoyao was an irresponsible master who never restrained his subordinates. Other than pretending to faint, Prime Minister Lu had no other choice but to withdraw. Rather than saying that he was unwell, it was better to say that he was ashamed to see others. "I see." Yi Li was not interested in what had happened to Prime Minister Lu. As a result, she only nodded and said with a smile, "Then I wish Prime Minister Lu a speedy recovery. As husband and wife, we still need to have a meal. We won't disturb noble consort and princess any longer. Chang'e, I have prepared the gift you requested. I will have someone deliver it to you later." This noble consort Lu even wanted to make a fuss about how she addressed Princess Chang'e. Did she think that just because she addressed Princess Chang'e as Miss Yi, she was not Princess Ding? Princess Chang'e smiled and said, "Thank you, Princess Chang'e. Since the two of you have not eaten, why don't you come in together?" Noble consort Lu took a step forward and stared fixedly at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao turned a blind eye to her. Princess Chang'e's elegant brows frowned. Although there were no outsiders here, they were still outside. This beloved consort of her father, the emperor, was truly too careless. Noble consort Lu, Uncle Prince Ding and the Princess Chang'e are eating together. Why should we, outsiders, disturb them? If you do not wish to eat, let's go back to an inn. Chapter 511. At this moment, Princess Chang'e finally understood why noble consort Lu, who had always treated her like air, had dragged her out to eat. She had even said that she was afraid that the food in the inn would not be to her taste. Throughout the entire journey, she had not seen noble consort Lu show any concern for her food. If not for the fact that Princess Chang'e did not want to stay at the inn and be bored, who would want to eat with her? She would only lose her appetite in front of that face that she thought was holy and inviolable, okay? Noble consort Lu had actually dragged her out to coincidentally meet with Uncle Prince Ding and Princess Ding. If they were in the palace and not outside, Princess Chang'e would have already reprimanded noble consort Lu for being shameless. Previously, she had heard that noble consort Lu admired Uncle Prince Ding, but she had never seen noble consort Lu so shamelessly insist on disturbing the couple's meal. Noble consort Lu was unwilling to listen to Princess Chang'e's advice. Instead, she stared fixedly at Mo Xiaoyao and said, "We can be considered old acquaintances. Could it be that you are not even willing to treat me to a meal?" Mo Xiaoyao slightly frowned. Just as noble consort Lu thought that he had finally loosened up and a smile appeared on his face, he raised his head and said with a frown, "I am not familiar with you." The smile that had not yet fully blossomed on noble consort Lu's face immediately froze. Seriously speaking, Mo Xiaoyao and noble consort Lu really could not be considered familiar. When he was young, he had already been engaged. Naturally, he would not look at other women. Even if he had not been engaged, he would not have liked the daughter of a family that did not see eye to eye with his father and brother. After Su Zuidi left, because of his illness, he did not leave his room. As for noble consort Lu, she had long since entered the imperial palace. After marrying Yi Li, he no longer had any women in his eyes. As a result, he truly was not familiar with noble consort Lu. Noble consort Lu was clearly hurt by the words not familiar. Her beautiful face instantly turned deathly pale. Gritting her teeth, she said, Am I really that unworthy of your attention? Yi Li frowned. Pulling at Mo Xiaoyao, she said, I'm hungry. Let's go in and eat. Noble consort Lu and Princess Changel, why don't you come with us? It wasn't that Yi Li was soft-hearted and wanted to invite them. It was just that although there weren't many people in the area where they were standing, it was still a place where people came and went. Noble consort Lu didn't care about her reputation, but she didn't like to hear that her husband was involved in scandals with other women. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and pulled Yi Li into a room they had booked earlier. When he walked past noble consort Lu gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, I don't need your fake kindness. Yi Li stopped and looked back at her with a faint smile. She sneered, So, are you coming or not? Noble consort Lu's pale face suddenly turned pink. She gritted her teeth and followed her. Mo Xiaoyao had never treated his guests well. Of course, he couldn't be blamed for this. Ever since he was young, no matter where he went, he was always warmly entertained by others. The number of people who could be entertained by him could be counted on one hand. As a result, when noble consort Lu and Princess Changel arrived a few steps behind, Mo Xiaoyao had already dismissed the waiter who was waiting for them to order. Unsurprisingly, the dishes he ordered were all things that Yi Li and himself liked to eat. As for Yi Li, because she was very familiar with Hua Tianxiang, she had some understanding of Princess Changel. She had also ordered several dishes that Princess Changel liked to eat. As a result, when the table was filled with dishes, noble consort Lu's expression became even more unsightly. Yi Li looked at the gloomy-faced noble consort Lu, who had only picked a few pieces of vegetables to eat, and felt somewhat puzzled. Even if noble consort Lu didn't order the dishes to her liking, the dishes in this restaurant shouldn't be so bad, right? While Yi Li was feeling puzzled, Mo Xiaoyao had already placed some of her favorite dishes into her bowl. Softly, he said, the cooking skills of this restaurant's cooks are not bad. Try it. Yi Li lowered her head and tasted a mouthful. Indeed, it was not bad. Although it could not compare to the Prince Ding Mansion's chefs or the Concentrated Fragrance Pavilion's chefs, it was definitely much better than Yi Li's. Yi Li was not a picky eater. She could even eat her own home-cooked dishes, much less this kind of cooking skill. Raising her hand, she placed a piece of chicken, which had been cooked to perfection, in Mo Xiaoyao's bowl, saying, Try this. It's very tasty. The expression on Mo Xiaoyao's face immediately became even gentler. Although he frowned at the sight of the chicken, he still lowered his head and ate the entire piece of chicken. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao's serious appearance as he ate, Yi Li smiled faintly. From time to time, she would place some food into his bowl. Because of his 10 years of illness, Mo Xiaoyao's diet was very simple, and he did not like to eat meat or fish. However, Yi Li believed that although it was necessary to eat more vegetarian dishes, they should be accompanied by meat and vegetables. As a result, from time to time, she would place some meat into Mo Xiaoyao's bowl. Fortunately, although Mo Xiaoyao did not like to eat meat, as long as it was given to him by Yi Li, he would eat it without saying a word. Over the years, he had developed the habit of having Yi Li place food into his bowl when the two of them ate together in private. It was to the point that Yi Li forgot to place food into his bowl while she was eating. By the time she realized, Mo Xiaoyao had already eaten more than half a bowl of white rice. She did not know whether to laugh or cry at a certain someone's childishness. Uncle Prince Ding and Princess Consort have such a good relationship. Princess Changle looked at the two of them, smiling enviously. Although she had seen many married couples, many of whom were deeply in love, Princess Changle still felt that the scene in front of her was beautiful and enviable. In the palace, when her imperial father ate a dish, he would have countless poisons tested. Furthermore, he would have palace maids and eunuchs taste test the food before he could feel at ease. Under these circumstances, which concubine or child would dare to place food into her imperial father's bowl? At the very least, in Princess Changle's memories, her imperial mother and imperial father had always eaten their own food. Yili glanced at her, unhappily saying, "What does a little girl know about relationships? Your uncle Prince Ding is very hard to please. Miss Yi, you clearly know that the prince does not like to eat those things. Why do you deliberately place food into his bowl?" Noble Consort Lu, who had been calm all this time, suddenly spoke up. Furthermore, under the gazes of everyone present, she placed some stir-fried green bamboo shoots into Mo Xiaoyao's bowl. Faintly smiling, she said, "I remember that the prince likes to eat green bamboo shoots the most." The side room immediately became quiet, the atmosphere becoming heavy. Originally, Mo Xiaoyao had just put down his chopsticks and was about to drink the mushroom and ginseng chicken soup that Yi Li had served him. Unexpectedly, he saw Noble Consort Lu place food into his bowl. Immediately, his expression sank. Abandoning the half-drunk soup, he raised his bowl and threw it at Noble Consort Lu. Noble Consort Lu was not a weak woman. As soon as she saw the bowl of soup coming at her, she immediately stepped aside. Unfortunately, the table was not big and the two were not far from each other. Therefore, although she stepped aside, half of her shoulder was still soaked by the chicken soup. The delicate white porcelain bowl hit the wall behind Noble Consort Lu and broke with a bang. "Prince Ding, you!" Noble Consort Lu had never thought that Mo Xiaoyao would treat her so rudely. For a moment, her face turned pale and she could not say a word. Looking at Noble Consort Lu's embarrassed face, Yi Li did not have any sympathy in her heart. If it were not for the fact that she did not want to be too rude, Yi Li would have directly scolded him, "Do you have any shame? Putting food into someone's bowl," not to mention in this era, even in her previous life, only people who were very close or had a good relationship with each other would do such a thing. Yi Li really didn't know what was going on in Noble Consort Lu's head. "Get out!" Mo Xiaoyao stared at Noble Consort Lu and said coldly. Chapter 512. You. Embarrassed, Noble Consort Lu bit her lip, gazing at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao remained unmoved. This time, his words were even more concise. Scram! In the end, she was still a woman. After being treated so heartlessly by Mo Xiaoyao, Noble Consort Lu finally got up and rushed out of the room. Mo Xiaoyao looked at the bamboo shoots in his bowl with disdain, pushing the bowl to the side. Yi Li silently placed the untouched bowl of chicken soup in his hand. Softly, she said, "Drink some more." Only then did Mo Xiaoyao pick up the bowl of chicken soup and slowly drink 2 mouthfuls. His originally furrowed brows gradually relaxed. Yi Li picked up an untouched bowl from the side and filled it with rice for him. Only then did she pick up her chopsticks and continue eating. Princess Changle looked at the two with a smile and said, "Of course I know that Uncle Prince Ding and Princess have a good relationship. Because if Princess Ding gives Uncle Prince Ding something that he doesn't like, Uncle Prince Ding will eat it all. However, even if someone else gives Uncle Prince Ding his favorite dish, Uncle Prince Ding will smash the bowl. Princess Consort, do you think I'm right?" Mischievous. Yi Li pursed her lips and said with a smile. Originally, Yi Li believed that after the incident at the restaurant, Noble Consort Lu would hate them to the bone and stay as far away as possible. As a result, the next morning, when they left the tavern and headed out of the city, they coincidentally ran into Prime Minister Lu's entourage. Yi Li's irritation rose to a new height. This was especially true when she saw Noble Consort Lu approach them with a calm expression, as if nothing had happened. Yi Li was left speechless. Princess Chang'e, who was following beside noble consort Lu, secretly shrugged her shoulders at Yi Li, squeezing out a mischievous expression. She smiled at Yi Li. The corners of Yi Li's eyes twitched as she swept a glance at noble consort Lu. Princess Chang'e shook her head slightly, rolling her eyes at the sky. Yi Li could only look up at the sky helplessly. Prince Ding, did you have a good rest last night? Noble consort Lu walked up to Mo Xiaoyao and asked softly. Although her expression was still indifferent, one could hear the genuine concern in her voice. Of her own accord, Princess Chang'e stopped in her tracks, standing slightly further away from noble consort Lu to admire the scenery. Was her imperial father really as suspicious as her imperial mother said? Then why had imperial father never suspected that his beloved concubine would make him a cuckold and even let her out to pester a married man? Nausea. Mo Xiaoyao said coldly. His silver hair shone faintly in the morning light. He turned around and walked to Yi Li, leaving noble consort Lu, who was still looking at him. Noble consort Lu silently gazed at the departing figure with snow-white hair. A trace of infatuation and sorrow flashed through her eyes. Yi Li turned to look at noble consort Lu. Smiling faintly, she said, "Prime Minister Lu, noble consort, please forgive me. Normally, our prince's temper is not so bad. It is only because he was disgusted at noon yesterday that he lost his appetite last night and this morning that he became like this." Mo Xiaoyao directly picked up Yi Li and placed her on the back of a horse. He then mounted the horse and sat behind Yi Li, raising the reins. He took the lead and left the city. He left behind a group of people with various expressions. Among them, noble consort Lu and Prime Minister Lu's expressions were particularly unsightly. There was no need to mention noble consort Lu. Although Prime Minister Lu was not present yesterday, he knew what had happened at the restaurant. Similarly, he felt that his daughter had gone too far. However, he was similarly displeased with Mo Xiaoyao's merciless behavior in front of so many people. Glancing at noble consort Lu, Prime Minister Lu said in a heavy voice, "Noble consort, it is time for us to set out. Let's go." Noble consort Lu unwillingly glanced at the city gate, where Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao had already disappeared. Finally, she turned around and got on the carriage. Feng Xiao and the others who were left behind looked at each other. After a while, Zhuo Jing frowned and said, "Young master, there seems to be something wrong with the Lu family." Su Qingchen glanced at the carriage that had already set off. The smile on her lips was like a spring breeze, but it made people feel cold. Something is indeed wrong. I have heard that Prince Ding rode a horse on a slanted bridge and was attracted by many women. I didn't expect that now that he is in the prime of his life, he is even more attractive to women than before. She said it gently and elegantly, but the people who listened to her felt a chill down their spines. Looking at the elegant carriage, Feng Xiao wanted to defend his boss and his good friend, but he couldn't. He had to shut his mouth silently. Even the noble consort of the Chu state was so infatuated. Wasn't this attracting bees and butterflies? Seeing that everyone had tacitly agreed, Su Qingchen nodded in satisfaction and changed the topic. "What do you think is wrong?" Zhuo Jing thought and then said with a frown, "The emperor sending noble consort Lu to Nanzhao is not right. Also, noble consort Lu is a bit too bold. If noble consort Lu's words and actions reach the emperor's ears, no matter how much the emperor favors her, he will be ruthless." Su Qingchen nodded and said, "That's right. She is so bold because she is certain that these things will not reach the emperor. Then, this time, there are no emperor's people among the messengers sent by the Chu state. How is that possible?" Feng Xiao said. They had all seen with their own eyes how suspicious Mo Jingqi was. Feng Xiao wondered if there was anyone in the world that Mo Jingqi could truly trust. No matter how much he trusted Prime Minister Lu and how much he doted on noble consort Lu, it was impossible for him not to put people around them. Su Qingchen lowered his head and thought for a while. He said, "Then Mo Jingqi thinks that he put people around them, but in fact, Those people are not his people. What does the Lu family want to do? Feng Xiao shook his head. He couldn't understand what young Master Qingchen couldn't figure out. He pulled the horse next to him and jumped on it. Let's think about it later. If we don't go now, the prince and princess will have to go through Broken Snow Pass. Mo Xiaoyao and his people didn't encounter any difficulties in Broken Snow Pass. They went out of Broken Snow Pass one after another with Prime Minister Lu and his people. After Broken Snow Pass, it was the land of Nanjiang. The people of Nanjiang were tough and good at controlling poisonous animals. They weren't afraid, but they didn't want to get into trouble. They didn't stop on the way. They went straight to the capital of Nanzhao. Mo Xiaoyao and his people were all riding fast horses, while noble consort Lu and her people were riding in carriages. Therefore, they left them far behind as soon as they went out of Broken Snow Pass. As a result, it was much quieter on the way. In just a few days, they had arrived at the capital of Nanzhao. The capital of Nanzhao was still as prosperous and noisy as it was many years ago. People of different ethnic groups could be seen at the gate of the city. Perhaps it was because of Princess Anqi's wedding. Although there were many remote tribes in Nanjiang that didn't belong to the Nanzhao kingdom, many tribal leaders would come out to give face to Princess Anqi's wedding. Therefore, the Nanzhao kingdom's royal city was much more lively than before. At the same time, there were many more guards inside and outside the city. When Mo Xiaoyao and Yili arrived, Princess Anqi came out of the city to welcome them in person. As soon as Yili jumped off the horse, Princess Anqi came up to them with her people. She said with a smile, "Prince Ding Mansion. I haven't seen you for a long time. You look even better than before." Yili said with a smile, "You flatter me, princess. Congratulations on your wedding." Chapter 513. The smile on Princess Anqi's face faded slightly, but she still accepted Yili's congratulations with a smile. She glanced sideways at the young man beside her and said to Yili and Mo Xiaoyao, "Prince Ding, Princess, this is my fiancé, Pu Ah." Yili looked up at the young man. He was about the same age as Princess Anqi. He was tall and slender, almost as tall as Mo Xiaoyao. But his skin color was different from the men of the Central Plains. His wheat-colored skin made him look more muscular and handsome. There was a hint of stiffness and undetectable embarrassment on his stiff face. Yili instinctively felt that this young man was a simple and honest person. She really didn't think that Princess Anqi would like him. The young man nodded at Mo Xiaoyao and Yili and said a few words that Yili couldn't understand. It didn't sound like the common language of Nanzhao. Mo Xiaoyao nodded at the young man and said a few words. That young man was clearly surprised that this white-clothed man could actually speak his language, and the gaze he looked at Mo Xiaoyao with immediately became much more enthusiastic. Princess Anqi smiled at Yili and said, "Pu Ah is the only son of the chief of a tribe in the south. His tribe was on good terms with my grandfather's tribe. I saw him a few times when I was young. But they have their own language and have always been xenophobic. He has just learned Nanzhao language, so I don't think you understand. He just said that you are welcome." The others naturally heard the conversation between Princess Anqi and Yili. Pu Ah looked at Princess Anqi and a trace of confusion flashed across his face. Princess Anqi whispered a few words to him. Pu Ah looked up and nodded at Yili with a smile. He said in a stiff Nanzhao language, "Welcome." Yili listened to the stiff and out-of-tune Nanzhao language. It was even stiffer than hers. It sounded anxious. He had just learned it. He nodded and replied in Nanzhao language, "Thank you. Congratulations." The young man clearly understood Yili's words. His expression towards the crowd became gentler as he muttered a few words to Princess Anqi. Princess Anqi said to Yili with a smile, "He said you're all my friends. You're very nice." Yili couldn't help but smile. She felt that this young man wasn't unworthy of Princess Anqi after all. After they were done exchanging pleasantries, Su Qingchen and the others caught up with them. Su Qingchen smiled at Princess Anqi. Congratulations, Your Highness. A bitter smile flashed across Princess Anqi's eyes. She lowered her eyes and said, Thank you. Thank you for coming. Su Qingchen smiled. I'm also very happy to be able to attend your wedding. Princess Anqi quickly adjusted herself and nodded with a smile. It's been a few years. I'm glad to see you. This is my fiancé, Pu. Princess Anqi turned her head and introduced Su Qingchen to Pu Ah in another language. Su Qingchen wasn't called the first young master of Dechu State for nothing. In Yi Li's words, if Mo Xiaoyao and Su Qingchen stood together, the first person people would notice would be Mo Xiaoyao. But that would be because of Mo Xiaoyao's white hair. And the last person people would look at would be Su Qingchen. Of course, there was no lack of Yi Li's intention to belittle her husband. But at least it showed that Su Qingchen and Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't be inferior to each other when they stood together. In fact, in terms of appearance, Su Qingchen might not be more handsome than Feng Xiao. He wasn't as handsome as Han Mingxi either. He didn't even care much about his clothes and accessories. His clothes were white clothes of the most common color and style. He also did not like to be like Feng Xiao, who was always holding a gorgeous gold-plated folding fan in his hand. Occasionally, he would just hold a folding fan that he had casually drawn in his study. On his waist hung a jade pendant that his grandfather had given him when he was young. It hadn't been changed for many years. But as long as he stood in front of people, people couldn't help but look at him. They were reluctant to look away. Su Qingchen always gave people a feeling of elegance and refinement, but he didn't have the high and mighty aura of an immortal. Instead, it was a kind of feeling that made people involuntarily submit and feel warm and comfortable. Most of the outstanding men in the world were too threatening compared to Su Qingchen. People couldn't help but be wary and alienated. Only Su Qingchen. Even Yi Li had never seen a man like Su Qingchen who made people want to get close to him and feel warm and peaceful. Even people who knew Su Qingchen's methods couldn't help but be attracted to him. Pu Hua was startled when he saw Su Qingchen. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes, but there was also relief and sadness. He nodded at Su Qingchen and also said welcome. He didn't know much Nanzhao language. Su Qingchen smiled gently and greeted him in Pu Hua's tribal language. It was the same tribal language, but Mo Xiaoyao's pronunciation was very similar to Princess Anqi's. It should be the standard language learned by outsiders. But when it came from Su Qingchen's mouth, it seemed to be different. It was more like Pu Hua's, but his voice was more pleasant. Seeing the faint sadness on the young man's face, Yi Li couldn't help but lean her head on Mo Xiaoyao's shoulder. She didn't want to look up. Brother, can you be any worse? It's fine if you don't like Princess Anqi, but now you're attacking her fiancé. Li, are you tired? Mo Xiaoyao asked with concern. He didn't care who Su Qingchen attacked, but he couldn't attack him anyway. Yi Li nodded weakly. She sympathized with the gloomy young man standing next to Su Qingchen. Princess Anqi looked at Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao holding hands and a trace of envy flashed through her eyes. She said with a smile, "Let's just talk here." Let's go into the city. I've already asked people to prepare a post house. If we continue to stand here, we might steal the souls of the girls in Nanzhao City. Then we'll be in trouble. Princess Anqi was right. Although they weren't standing in the center of the city gate, they were too eye-catching. From Mo Xiaoyao and Su Qingchen to Feng Xiao, Zhuo Jing, Lin Han and Qin Feng, any one of them was enough to attract a large number of girls. At this time, there were already many young girls standing at the city gate. The people of Nanjiang were always enthusiastic. If it weren't for the guards of Wangcheng, they might have already rushed forward to express their love. After entering the city, Princess Anqi led them directly to a post house not far from the palace and the princess residence. Mo Xiaoyao and the others were tired from the journey. Naturally, they wouldn't go to the palace to see the king of Nanzhao as soon as they entered the city. Princess Anshi personally led them to a courtyard in the post house that had already been prepared. She ordered the servants of the post house to take good care of them. Seeing Princess Anshi put in so much effort, Yili felt even more embarrassed about her brother's unkindness. Receiving Yili's apology, Princess Anshi smiled helplessly. She looked back at Pu Ah, who was talking to Mo Xiaoyao and Su Qingchen not far away. Mo Xiaoyao and Su Qingchen were both proficient in many Nanjiang languages, so they didn't have any language barriers when talking to Pu Ah. From Yili's perspective, the three of them were chatting quite well. However, the young man sandwiched between Mo Xiaoyao and Su Qingchen was even more inconspicuous. Princess Anshi sighed helplessly. Prince Ding and Qingchen are both too outstanding. It's really difficult to find someone as outstanding as them. Pu Ah and I have known each other since we were young. He's not a bad person and has always been good to me. There's nothing wrong with marrying him. Chapter 514. Yili nodded and said, "Your Highness made the right choice." From Pu A's behavior and expression, it was obvious that he valued Princess Anshi very much. More importantly, he obviously knew that Princess Anshi was in love with Su Qingchen, but there was only a trace of sadness and admiration in his eyes when he looked at Su Qingchen. There wasn't a trace of jealousy or hatred in his eyes, which showed that he was a broad-minded person. Princess Anshi was the crown princess of Nanzhao, the future king of Nanzhao. If Su Qingchen was from Nanzhao and loved her deeply, they would be a perfect match. However, although Su Qingchen liked to travel around when he was young, he would inevitably return to his family in the end. Princess Anshi, as the crown princess, could not leave Nanzhao and follow Su Qingchen back to the Su family. Young Master Su's literary talent was outstanding. He would not be comfortable staying in a place like Nanzhao for the rest of his life. More importantly, Su Qingchen looked warm and approachable, but in fact, he was indifferent and distant. Unless it was someone he cared about, he would protect them. However, he was very cold to those he did not care about. Most of the time, when you are still immersed in his warmth like a spring breeze, he is already thousands of miles away from you. Yili thought that even if Princess Anshi married Mo Xiaoyao, she would not necessarily be happier than if she married Pu A. The one who was loved would always be happier than the one who was loved. Of course, it would be better if she was loved and loved at the same time. Princess Anshi looked at Yili and said with a smile, "Actually, I envy Princess Ding the most. I'm afraid that all the women in the world envy Princess Ding." Yili looked back at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao also looked back at her. The two of them looked at each other and couldn't help but smile. A faint warmth spread between the two of them. Yili looked back at Princess Anshi and said with a smile, "Your Highness can be like me. Pu A will be a good husband." Looking at Princess Anshi, Yili reached out to hold her hand and said sincerely, "Since you've made up your mind, let go of the past and make good use of it." There was a saying in the Central Plains, "If there are flowers to be plucked, they must be plucked straight. If there are no flowers left, the branches will be empty." Although it wasn't appropriate to use it here, it still made some sense. Pu Ah was interested in the princess. Since the princess had chosen him, she must have believed in him. In that case, why not manage this marriage well? The human heart was made of flesh. If he waited until the human heart turned cold, it would be too late for regrets. Prince and I had only met once or twice before we got married. You guys are much better than us, aren't you? Princess Anshi nodded and said, "I understand." Ding Wangfei, thank you. Yili shook her head and glanced at the elegant young Master Qingchen. She raised her eyebrows and said, "As for that person, don't take him too seriously. Eldest aunt scolded him every day at home. Who knows how many girls in Glass City he ignored. I estimate that at least half of the girls in Glass City are cursing him every day." Princess Anshi was interested and asked curiously, "Cursing him for what?" Yili said with a smile, "Not cursing him for not being able to find a wife in this lifetime." probably cursing him for falling in love with a girl one day but being ignored by her. Anyway, if I was a girl and was ignored like that, I would curse him like that. Princess Anchi finally couldn't help but laugh. The sadness between her eyebrows dissipated. She said with a smile, "It's too sad to not be able to find a wife in this lifetime. Just curse him for falling in love with a girl and being ignored by her." Seeing the smile and relief in Princess Anchi's eyes, Yili felt relieved. No matter what, it was good to let it go. After sending off Princess Anchi, Su Qingchen turned to look at Yili and said sincerely, "Li, big brother thanks you." Su Qingchen understood why Yili had said so much to Princess Anchi. She didn't have much of a relationship with Princess Anchi, so she didn't need to spend so much effort. Yili did all this because she didn't want Princess Anchi to be unable to let go and hate Su Qingchen. If she was an ordinary girl, it wouldn't be a big deal. But Princess Anchi was the daughter of the crown prince. She had too much power. If she really took advantage of a blind spot, it might give Su Qingchen a headache for a while. Moreover, although Su Qingchen didn't have any romantic feelings for Princess Anchi, he did treat her as a friend. It would be a pity if their friendship was affected because of this. Yili rolled her eyes and pursed her lips. "No need to thank me. Big brother, since you don't have any feelings for other girls, then don't provoke them. I can't be your shield all the time." Speaking of this, Yili couldn't help but be glad that she had married Mo Xiaoyao long ago and that they were publicly acknowledged as a loving couple. Every time she walked with Su Qingchen, she would be glared at by many girls who didn't know the truth. Thinking of how she had lied to Princess Anchi that she was Su Qingchen's fiancée, Yili couldn't help but be glad that she had met Princess Anchi. If she had met another girl, she might have pulled out a knife and stabbed her. Su Qingchen touched his nose apologetically and didn't know what to say. He really didn't want to provoke any girl, and it wasn't that he was arrogant and looked down on anyone. It was just that he didn't have that kind of feeling. "Li, I told you long ago that big brother won't like any girl." Mo Xiaoyao walked out and put an arm around Yili's waist and pulled her into his arms with a smile. Yili immediately recalled what Mo Xiaoyao had said about Su Qingchen's sexual orientation and her face stiffened. She turned to look at Su Qingchen and saw that he didn't have any intention of refuting. Her heart sank again. Although she didn't discriminate against homosexuals, she still wasn't prepared for her big brother to really become a homosexual. Moreover, how was she going to explain this to eldest uncle and eldest aunt? Su Qingchen saw Yili's gloomy expression and thought that she was worried about him. He hurriedly said, "Li, don't be angry. Big brother didn't want to do this kind of thing." Seeing Su Qingchen's rare worried expression, Yili's heart skipped a beat. That's right, big brother didn't want to be a homosexual either. Big brother didn't say anything for so many years. He probably didn't want others to know. Young Master Qingchen was famous, but if word got out that he was a homosexual. "I understand. Big brother, don't be troubled. Li won't ask about it in the future." Su Qingchen was stunned. He was touched by his sister's understanding, but for some reason, he felt that there was something wrong with the way Li looked at him. What was with that look of understanding, sympathy, and comfort? "We've been on the road for a few days. Everyone must be tired. Big brother, I'll take Li back to her room to rest first," Mo Xiaoyao said slowly. Su Qingchen, who still felt that something was wrong, waved his hand to let the two of them do as they pleased. He replayed the conversation in his mind and finally found where the problem was. Young Master Qingchen's gentle and refined elegance finally cracked. His face was so pale that it almost scared Zhuo Jing and Lin Han, who were about to leave the courtyard. Mo Xiaoyao. What did he mean by he wouldn't like any girl? Mo Xiaoyao, that bastard, was clearly hinting that he didn't like girls. Su Qingchen finally found the reason why Li had been looking at him strangely a few days ago. Thinking of the half-smile Mo Xiaoyao gave him before he left, young Master Qingchen couldn't help but grit his teeth. Mo Xiaoyao, just you wait. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.